For today, May 5th, 2022, I am Jeremy Hooper, and I will be serving as the chairman for today's meeting. I will point out that we do have 5 members present, which represents a quorum, and we're able to conduct business. We may have 2 others join us. Philip Shoemaker will be 15 minutes late, and Louise McCuro is running behind as well. I'll go ahead and allow the board members to introduce themselves, starting on my right.
I'm Sonia Rothstein.
David Alzamora.
Jack Farrell.
Matt Jones.
And we have Alex Cameron with us as liaison to staff, and Darren Burrich as well. Thank you for joining us today. I want to remind everyone, certainly the board members, to please speak clearly and directly into your microphone, and please make sure that they are on. We are not going to enter into a public hearing today, but we are going to consider the small area plans, and we will be taking comments from the public. We're going to address each plan individually. So after the first plan, we'll accept the comments upon that plan, and then we will be accepting comments after the second plan is introduced as well. So please sign up in the back. The sign-up sheets are in the back next to the agendas if needed. If any comments have been forwarded to the village staff previous to this meeting, they have been printed out and given to the board members before the meeting for our review. The first agenda item that we have is the approval of minutes for the April 7th, 2022 meeting. Does anybody have any amendments or adjustments? Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the planning and zoning board minutes from April 2022, please?
I move to accept the minutes as submitted for the April 7th, 2022 regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Board.
I get a second.
Second.
Motion made by Jack Farrell, second made by Sonia Rothstein. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the minutes from the April Planning and Zoning Board meeting are approved as written. The next agenda item is for the review of the small area plans from staff to the board. They are asking that we make a recommendation to council today. I want to make sure that as we move forward, each board member considers that and makes sure that we are comfortable with that consideration as we do that. Gentlemen,
Okay.
which plan do you want to review first?
We'll start with the Village Place plan. And thank you for kicking it off. Thank you for planning and zoning board members and the public showing up. Tonight, we're nearing the end of a long process, which kicks off another hopefully short process. But tonight, we are asking for consideration by the Planning and Zoning Board of the small area plans. We're looking, P&Z is being specifically asked to provide a recommendation on the small area plans. That recommendation will then be forwarded to the Common Council for their consideration. P&Z may recommend the plans as is, meaning as presented to you, or may provide alternative recommendations as a majority. Now, I think the way I've laid things out within the staff memo is I laid out some options based on some of the conversations that we have had as the Planning and Zoning Board. Those are ones that were fresh in my mind. There are other ones that you can consider, but again, you consider that as a board and the majority. For Village Place, staff has identified 4 potential options for P&Z to consider. For Pinehurst South, staff has identified 2 options for P&Z to consider. Again, if there's something that we missed, if you hear something during public comment, anything like that, you can always make recommendations, but again, we act as a majority. I think this is an important point that we need to stress, is that approval of the plans in any form, so if we recommend the plans, goes to council to approve it, it does not create a reality that anything that you see in these plans are going to occur. The plans aren't they don't self-implement themselves, they require other actions. So they do not create a reality that any of the illustrations or renderings shown will occur in the future. And I think you see that discussed time and time again within the plans themselves. We say the illustrations are illustrative. They're illustrative. So that just needs to be kept in mind because while it shows a potential reality, it doesn't create the reality. There are things that come afterwards, like Jack has been eager, and rightfully so, to move on to the next phase of this planning process. That is where the rubber meets the road. When we start doing zoning changes to implement these plans, that is where, that is how they get, that is a portion of how they get implemented. So in that regard, if we see something that is totally, objectionable, such as the residential in Pinehurst South, south of Blake Boulevard, east of NC5, or the commercial along Village Place in Magnolia, make the recommendation, make the change, because what's going to happen is when we follow up and start working on those form-based codes, and we start working on those regulating plans, we're going to make sure that some of those land uses match up to what's within these plans. The plans, as I just said, provide a guide for the future for such actions as zoning changes to implement land use and the architectural detail. So we talk about within these plans how important architectural detail and imagery is and things like that. When we follow through with the form-based code, there's going to be some strong recommendations for architectural standards within those form-based codes. Anything, as we move forward with zoning changes, just about anything that to implement aspects of these plans require future public hearings and reviews. Will generally include that of the Planning and Zoning Board, the Village Council, and other committees as applicable. So as we kick off, we all know that these are the two small area plan areas. Village Place, which is, this doesn't work. No, it does not. Does it work? No, it doesn't work. All right, so Village Place is right here. It's approximately 100 acres, and Village Place is on the north, Pinehurst South is on the south, and I think Pinehurst South, that's approximately, what do we have there, about 200 some acres. If I was looking at either of the two areas, the one that has more developable land as it currently sits, that would be Pinehurst South. So we're not going to go into, I'm not going to go into a review of the entire document. Just know we've done this before. We've done this. You've sat and listened to me for 5 hours talking about this. Really, when it comes down to the plan, we have an introduction. We have the existing conditions. That tells you, that shows the existing development. We have a market analysis in there. We include the public outreach when we had the public workshops. And then really where we start to get into the meat of this thing is the recommendations. And that is where you'll start to see those illustrations with those proposed land use plans, things like that, some of the renderings. That is really the important part of this plan, because as we start to see how those land uses start to line up, that is when we follow up and do the form-based code to implement. And then an implementation section that talks about some fiscal information. Everything else within this plan is there's a lot of background. The important part is that recommendations chapter. So this is Village Place. This shows kind of an illustrative rendering, bird's eye rendering of what the area could look like based on the plan illustrations. So you can start to see how the development could lay out along Magnolia, and how we're really, with the Village Place plan, we really center the development and create that active space around the brewery area. And that, involves a lot of the public service complex and some more county utilities. You can see some of the road extensions, things like that. So we show a neighborhood green being created in there. We talk a little bit about what we want to see with Rattlesnake Trail. But the real heart of this is that mixed-use district around the brewery. So this would be this is the kind of the preferred plan set that was shown in the planning document. And what you see here is, again, please hope this works. Oh, it does. This is that core area. Here's the brewery, and then you see a street system being proposed throughout this area to kind of focus the development and activity. We'll note that when we did the new core plan years back, Rattlesnake extended through the area to try and get up to Community Road. This one, the goal of the plan changed, and we didn't want to connect Rattlesnake directly through the area. We use that connection coming down here off of McIntyre. So these would be commercial mixed-use buildings. You can see the new east-west connection to Spur Road, a new connection to Orange Road right here, potentially. And these extend current roads that are already in place. We have, and we'll come to talk about this later on with our recommendations, we're showing a non-residential development pattern along Magnolia. I've laid out some options because we had the discussion on what should be the recommended land use pattern along Magnolia, especially on the west side. So that's up for debate, and that's up for some discussion amongst you based on some of the previous concerns. Rattlesnake itself, we're showing just basically a commercial infill, really redevelopment pattern along Rattlesnake. This is a kind of a bird's eye view of that. This is a bird's eye view or a ground level view of this area, the crossroads behind the brewery. So you can see the brewery smokestack over here, and this kind of shows what we could envision the development pattern occurring within this particular area. It shows that we would like to create a strong street frontage, active street frontage along the street. Sorry, that shouldn't be on. So you see all these windows. It's supposed to create activity for people walking down the street. So you can see the buildings would be pulled closer to the street right-of-way line, things like that. Proposed restaurant, we like to see a proposed restaurant, potentially a hotel in this area. Those types of uses we'd like to potentially promote in this crossroads area. I think we show some potential live-work units in here, but this would kind of be that focused core of this area, the activity center of this area. This is a detail plan that kind of that takes what you just showed and what I just showed, and really and focuses it in on this core area. Again, here's the brewery. This shows potential. You could have potential commercial, potential live work, a potential hotel, live work units, restaurant over here. So it shows a potential of uses that could locate within this area. They can already locate because the area is zoned village mixed use. So that use can already develop in here. But this shows how a street pattern could be developed throughout the area to come out here on McCaskill. Again, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but we're showing a non-residential development pattern along the west side of Magnolia. And again, we have some options that the Planning and Zoning Board will consider as part of a recommendation. Let's see, I'm going to fast forward through Pinehurst South and get to the Village Place recommendation. So when we're asking for a recommendation, we're asking one of four options. Option one is to support the non-residential land use development pattern. And again, these are the options that we discussed, some of the options that were raised when we're talking about this in our work session. Option to support the non-residential land use pattern along Magnolia Road as shown in the detail and preferred build-out plans. An option to that, and we had discussion at this at our last meeting, was to include only the 3.9 acre property known as the Tradition Site at the corner of McCaskill and Magnolia. So that would pull that commercial back to that property only. So that is an option that you could consider. Option two would be to support residential single-family attached or detached along Magnolia Road frontage, retaining the single-family detached pattern to the west. And I have rendered, I'll use the detail plans after I get through this. Option three, support the residential single-family detached only along the Magnolia Road frontage. And then four, support non-residential or single-family attached along Magnolia Road frontage, retaining the single-family detached pattern to the west. So what I'm talking about here is this is the current pattern as shown within the small area plan. This was one of the original. This goes back to Public Workshop number 2. This was one of the original patterns that we had looked at or was proposed. Was this residential pattern? It's a single-family detached residential pattern along Magnolia. It was actually on both sides of the road at one point. And then this could be a commercial building at the corner of McCaskill and Magnolia. So when we started to write the options that we provided really are working on these two. I gotta get up over here because technical difficulties. So the options really work on these two areas. So you see this non-residential development pattern. If you chose the option that allows that either requires the commercial or we build in, it would require or would allow for single-family residential attached or detached, and the other option would simply carve out this area north of, south of that, and that would be retained as residential. So those, the options layout for either of those, it's easier to work with, or it is easier to work with that tradition site because the tradition site is generally one parcel, and that's located along here. So all of the options retain the single-family detached pattern to the west of that, butting up to Cadell Road. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the Planning and Zoning Board.
Aaron, thank you very much. And do you mind if I kindly ask for the sign-up sheet? And if you did not sign up, everybody, I will go ahead and accept comments after I go through the list. So please understand you will get your chance to speak. I do ask, however, considering the nature that we keep our comments within 3 minutes. So I'll kind of give you a kind wave there as we approach that 30 seconds to ending. And then, of course, firm it up until, we complete that 3 minutes. So thank you. I want to go ahead and hear comments from the public before we get into our deliberation so we can make sure that we address those concerns during our conversations. So first, and forgive me, I'm sorry, is it Lynn Goathammer? Please welcome Lynn. Please come on up. Please speak directly into the microphone. Do you mind going ahead and giving your address as well?
11 Salem Lane
Thank
in
you.
Pinehurst.
Thank you, ma'am.
I was just curious about where you have these potential attached houses. Would that be where one person owns both sides? Or would they be sold separately? Two different owners in the same building?
Generally, it would be a townhouse style living where the townhouse unit itself would be a separate property from the one next door to it.
Do they pay a monthly maintenance to be in these homes?
Depends on how the ownership structure is. It just depends on the ownership structure.
I just want to say, when I was a kid, I lived in a two-family house, and my first home I bought was a two-family house, but the one person owned both sides, or up and down, however. And when I see places where two different owners have two different sides, it starts looking really shabby really quickly because they do different things, and I'm not sure whether you'll be able to create rules and laws and regulations that will prevent that. So I think you're better off to stick with one family. How many houses or residences do you anticipate being in this area?
So Lynn, first, and if this goes for everybody, and I'll give you a little extra time here, I want to make sure that please understand, we may not be able to directly answer all of your questions as you stand at the podium. We'll make sure that we include them in our deliberations and considerations. And also to kind of your point there, what we're discussing today in reality is an overall plan theory that's going to further direct some zoning in these areas where a lot of those decisions will be made on what someone could or could not do at kind of the later stage of the zoning there. So forgive us if we're not actually able to give you a direct answer, because currently today, this is our theoretical plan. Does that help a little bit?
I'm not sure,
Okay.
but I'll go forward with it. So what you want me to do is not necessarily ask questions about what the future will hold, but just give my opinion of the basic concept of this?
Please.
Okay, I'll be glad to. Several years back, you had your Planapalooza, which I called the Scamapalooza. I went to all the meetings, and at no point were they really asking what we wanted. They let us at some point. The main things I heard is they wanted bike trails, walkability, and some little leagues in town. I never heard anyone say we want Pinehurst to grow. We want it bigger. We want it urbanized. And the guy that was facilitating, who's supposed to stay neutral to the content, was the whole time pushing his own concept. And when I looked at his credentials later, he was an urban planner. And I couldn't understand why we brought an urban planner into our suburban town. And the people who moved here because they like what Pinehurst is, not because they want to see it developed into something completely different than what we bought into. So the whole time, and he was the one pushing these 3 downtown business districts. We have one, that's enough for our town. And I just worry about all the building up that I'm seeing here. I don't think it's not just that it's not very nice, it's not very nicely done, but it's just every time there's a lot, it's just being clear cut. Then they want to put fences all around in the back where they used to have privacy from trees. If you go to the older homes, that's what they have. And so the having all this development coming in and developers coming in is turning this into something completely different than what it was. It used to be someone came in, they bought a lot, they found a builder, and they designed their own home, and everything was different. Now everything looks the same. And I think in the long run, if you're looking at what do you want this to be 10, 20 years from now, do you want it to look like what it is, or do you want it to look like something completely different that we never bought into? And I just say that the traffic's getting worse and worse and out of control, and the schools, we're building new schools, and I think people are moving in faster than we can even build them to be in. And meanwhile, the property taxes don't cover that kind of cost. So I heard a few years back it cost $8,000 per year per child to educate them in this town. And even if you're getting $2,000 in property tax, on my one little street, there's 10 houses, that would be 20,000. We got 8 kids, that's 56,000. So we're not covering those kind of costs. And I guess you're looking for taxes on things that are for sale and stuff, but that's not bringing in businesses that people make enough money to now afford the housing and probably growing taxes and everything else that comes with urbanizing our little unurban area. So I personally am very worried about doing this to
Yes, ma'am.
what we moved into.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. All right, so next we have Steve Say. Welcome, Steve. Do you mind
Thank
giving your address as well?
It'd be 5 McDonald Road East, Pinehurst. Thanks. Let me give you a little overview. So that little 3.9 acre parcel I control. You know, when folks get up and talk about we, I'm not sure who we is, and it's a kind of a systemic problem here in Pinehurst. I've been here for 16 years. I raised 3 kids here. Yeah, I like good schools. I'm sure all the speakers, not just the young lady that spoke, but some of the older folks here, they all raised kids somewhere. I believe they all went to school somewhere. So this idea that somehow we're going to set up a fence around the community, quite frankly, pisses me off. And I'm tired of it. And I'm tired of subgroups that think they're going to turn the town into their own HOA that they control. And look, I've lived here, I've invested here significantly. I happen to like to live in nice places personally. Yeah, every individual in this room has a car, I believe, and I believe adds to the traffic issue, but maybe that's incorrect. You know, things like parks, schools, rec centers, you know, it's all part of a community. And you know, as you know, some people in this room are more educated than others about, for example, what could have happened to the piece of property that I bought 4 years ago to prevent, quite frankly, it being ruined forever by somebody looking for a quick buck. And if you don't understand that, you might want to read a little history and figure that out, and I'll be happy to educate as well. So, you know, this whole we again, let's talk about how we do things in a positive way. I happen to like nice restaurants. You guys probably do as well. I like to play a nice round of golf. That just doesn't happen, right? And so if you can consider, we being everybody, not the perceived groups that seem to want to control the town and the rules per se, that would be appreciated. And I want to thank the staff. I've talked to Darren a lot about some thoughts that I've had, and I still live right around the corner, so I'm not one of these dastardly out-of-towners trying to stuff cash in my pocket as fast as I can, as some have said. Again, I've been here for 16 years, but that doesn't give me any more rights than someone who moved here last year. I don't think. I think this is still America, right? So I think together we can figure out the right way to go. And create an environment that is that people will be proud of and happy to be here for the next 100 years. But there is a pattern that's been set here. We're 125 plus years in, so that would be my view on things, and I look forward to hearing the rest of the conversation.
Hey, Steve, before you go away, you're a property owner within the district. You own the property at the corner of McCaskill and...
I think so.
...and Magnolia. What, your thoughts on the plan of what's being currently proposed, at least in your part of the planning area? What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. Well, as we've talked about, I have a lot of things that I've thought about for that property. Certainly more flexibility is always good. And as people have heard me say, I'm worried about the next 100 years, not the next 100 days, right? So I'm fortunate enough to have the ability to have that sort of time frame. And as I've said to Darren and others, both myself and my group, I mean, we have a real intent to put a legacy property that, in 100 years, someone's going to look back and say, hey, that was really the right thing. And that's how we see it. Yeah, I certainly like the flexibility. I mean, look, as certainly the resort has found out, parking is a pretty major issue. Of course, as I've said before, some pigs are more equal than others. We do need to wrestle that, how do we deal with parking and traffic? As I've also said, traffic is really the number one issue here. But that doesn't preclude people, again, from moving in here. That's kind of how the world works. People find a nice place and they want to be here. So that doesn't mean we screw it up. I mean, it means that, we come up with the best plan possible. But, this isn't some, Soviet-style planning, I don't think. So, how do we best fit what the community needs going forward? And look, it's going to grow. I mean, you can't say, and if you put the gates around Pinehurst, guess what? As we've seen on some of the things that have gone up on Murdochsville Road, outside of the town itself, I mean, people are going to find places to put their product, whether I like it or not, or others like it, is kind of irrelevant once it gets out of the town's area.
I want to make sure that I'm very considerate to you as a key property owner
Sure.
towards this thing, but also want to be considerate to the time that we're allotting to everybody
Sure.
else. We may actually call upon you if we have maybe a direct question.
Well,
here later in our
certainly,
deliberation.
as everybody in this room probably knows, I'm happy to comment.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Tim Copper. Welcome, Mr. Copper. Do you mind stating your address as well for us?
105 Rattlesnake Trail.
Thank you.
And I know you wanted us to keep speaking to just this plan, but then, you went ahead and kind of called us up in order. And I don't really see a lot of change on this particular plan for my property, but my biggest concern is, like, one of the plans had my apartments being changed into roads and single-family homes. I'm a little concerned about the gentrification part of it. I think if anybody's gone to restaurants in town now, we have a little bit of shortage of wait staff and help in a lot of areas of town. And, my units provide fairly low-income housing for a lot of people. If you change all those to single-family, we're going to do away with that. And we're just going to push people further and further out of town. They're going to have to commute further into town to work. And so, I understand the plan, I guess, but I don't really see who it's helping. So, and that's all I have to say. So, all right.
Thank you. Frank Macer. Welcome, Frank. As the same, do you mind just announcing your address for us in the beginning?
45 Community Road.
Welcome.
I know we're supposed to be looking at the big picture here, and it's a 20, 30, 50-year plan. My main comment is just, as we proceed in this, and, you're the Planning and Zoning Board, when the recommendations come down to the specific zoning, I think that we ought to retain the diversity in the uses, the flexibility for the development to create what we want to create. I like the concept. There's a long ways to go to get this started. There's a long ways to go to get it, to continue it. But we need the diversity in the zoning. Right now, my property is on village mixed use, which is a very diverse, a very good zoning district, to create what we're trying to do here. So I would just request that, thoughtful consideration be given before changing to some very, very specific zoning, which just singles out a single use. I think if you look at the village mixed-use zoning now, that's, at least it's what my property is zoned, and I'm not sure of all the area of it. I know all of it's not, like Mr. Cooper's property is zoned differently. But that type of zoning is what we need if you want to actually create this, instead of just spending a lot of money with consultants to draw pretty colored pictures. So.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Kevin Drum. Kevin, welcome. Glad to see you.
Much to say and not enough time to say it.
Sorry to only give you 3 minutes, sir.
I want to just thank Design Collective, Ramey Kemp Associates, Dougal Real Estate Advisors, and the village staff. They have worked their butt off, and I'm so impressed with their work. They have given us a strategy for the future, form-based codes that will, whatever the use is, it's going to be good looking if we get this done. And I just want to congratulate you guys on getting the right professionals, the right attitude, and I'm hoping this is the beginning of form-based codes throughout the village of Pinehurst. So, no one has to be concerned about the look, the feel, the congruency. So that's the first thing I want to say. And my name's Kevin Drum. I live at 41 Shaw Road. The Barretts were about to sell these 3 lots on Magnolia to a developer, and my wife inquired to Bobby Barrett about 5 years ago about buying them, and he called my wife and says, I don't want to sell it to them. I'd rather sell it to you guys. I know you'll do something good there. We have no idea what we're going to do. We're kind of, we don't know what we're going to do with that property, but I have a higher power to answer to, my friend, the Barrett family, and then the Planning and Zoning Department, and I promised them that I take care of that property, because the person they were going to sell it to was going to do probably some, something a little different. But the one concern I have is, like everyone's saying, lack of flexibility, the unknowns of the future, and the lack of flexibility if something is just, like if my property is zoned residential, which probably fine with us, but mixed use would maybe allow that to happen as well. And I just think having flexibility, when you look out in front of the 3 lots I have, I look at an industrial barbed wire fence with a bunch of vehicles. And one, I look at a parking lot, and the other, and a brewery on the other. And, I have I've grown up here. I've lived here 50 years. I remember the old railroad tracks used to put the coal down there. And the railroad owned one of the houses on my lot, because the railroad would pull in to dump the coal to the steam plant. Steve Stay's property was the stable. It was an industrial area. Steve Stay's property was the stable. And that was the industrial complex. The village hall was a junkyard. And, this was the industrial area. I would say commercial, industrial is what I'd call it, kind of like a step above commercial. And I just feel like it looked like my property was singled out. I've been privileged to see some emails on Freedom of Information Act between Jack Farrell and Mr. Pizzella and some other people. And so I already know Jack's opinion on this, because I've got to see it. But I'm just asking for the rest of the planning and zoning to have an open mind and listen to the professionals, because I think a lot of this is going to be market-driven. But when you have the luxury of form-based codes and the luxury of the historic commission going to have to approve these projects, I really feel you're well protected, and I don't think there's anything to be scared of. But it's pretty clear to me that my property, while it's zoned residential, and kind of one of our intents is we don't want to go up and down that big staircase we got pretty soon. We're at that age where we want to just a one-level thing. So we see the possibility of possibly building there a home for us. But we're a little, when you got all this other commercial uses across the street, and it just seems like it's a possibility that the highest best use might be mixed use for me. So I just wanted you to know that, but we're gonna do whatever the village tells us to do. We're always gonna do the right thing. That's why Mr. Barrett sold me the property. But I look at some of the stuff in here.
Kevin, we're over our time.
Okay.
Sorry to stop.
I'll stop.
And again, as we've got plenty of key property owners here well within this district today. So again, the
You
board
said
may
you were
feel
going to talk to Steve, if you ever
comfortable.
wanted
Yes,
to
sir.
talk,
That's what I was
please
going
give
to
me a
say.
call.
Thank you. And our last speaker is John Webster. Welcome, Mr. Webster. Mr. Webster, if you don't mind just stating your address for us.
Sure. It's 140 West Mackenzie.
Thank you, sir. Welcome.
And my comments just have to do with, well, to begin with, I was at a sort of workshop not so long ago, and in which we had lots of little red dots and green dots and all the rest of it. I've never heard whatever happened of that. Maybe the staff can tell me. Did we ever get some feedback on what that meeting said and what people's comments were?
Well, we've shared all those comments with the Planning and Zoning Board and the council.
And the council?
Yeah.
And so it's on Nova's agenda somewhere?
No, I don't think we've emailed it. I guess we can put those all up. I guess that's something that we didn't do.
Okay, so the public hasn't had access to them, right?
No, we haven't uploaded those, but I can put those up on the website.
Well, it'd be useful.
Yes.
I think it'd be
Mr.
nice
Webster,
to hear what people say.
In short, there were pictures taken of each of the boards and the comments and forwarded to at least us as a board. But I think Darren does have an answer at some point in time of whether or not it was publicly presented. So
Yeah, we didn't put them up on the, we could have put it, that's a good note. We should probably put it up on the project website, so I'm going to make a note to put it up there.
I'll give you a little bit of time over there for that.
Okay. So what I see in your presentation today is very little change, frankly. I mean, you know, there's meeting after meeting. Public actually has things to say, and yet it's the same old plans back again and again, unfortunately. So I get the impression that we go through this process, but it doesn't matter. You know, the staff have decided something, and this is what we're going to get again and again. And I think if I'm going to comment on just 2 or 3 different things is, you know, Kevin Drum was just speaking about Magnolia. Well, that started off, his property wasn't in it, then it was in it, now potentially it's out of it again. But this happens against people who live in single-family residential properties on the other side. It's Cadell Road or something like that. So nobody seems to worry about them. The Monticello utilities idea doesn't seem to be something that anybody's worried about, Quail Haven and so on. I mean, to take that over there at the cost and the noise and smell and all the rest of it seems very unfair to the people who live there. And also, the overriding comment I have is this shouldn't be driven by a marketing plan or a marketing survey. It's what we want in this place. We don't have to cater to a marketing plan. So if people are telling you again and again, we want lower density, please listen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. So that's the end of our list. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on the Village Place Small Area Plan? Speak your piece, okay. So as we have no other comments from the public, we'll go ahead and turn it over to the board for our deliberations and discussions. I think maybe the best approach at this point in time is to maybe go ahead and start with Philip and come around with some general comments. And I just want to mention a couple things to us as a board as we move forward with this thing. There's a lot of stuff to consider. It's very, very wide and very undefinitive in a lot of ways. And there is a lot of input that we all have everywhere in this thing. So for me, how do we funnel it down to a decision? So I want us to all consider that as we have these discussions amongst each other. And I want us to all kind of, just like I've said in the past, I want us to approach each conversation with kind of a result in mind. If the concerns that we kind of have come up with in the past as a board and as we look for any sort of answer or request to council, please have a solution in mind, something that you would want to add on to this plan as some sort of amendment or change or direction. So please think of that as we have our conversations and think about it funneling down towards a decision. Does that make sense for everybody? Philip, let's go ahead and begin with you and some overall thoughts.
And first off, apologies for being late today. I drove about an hour and a half to get here, and I was doing my best to stay within the confines of the speed limit.
Thanks for coming.
So I took notes on a couple themes that people mentioned. It was keeping some hash marks as they were going down. And, you know, some of the things I'm just going to, this is more statements than opinion right now. So I heard, you know, we want quality over quantity. We want flexibility. There was a mention of no single family, then a mention of, you know, kind of preserving single family, form-based code and consistency, and then, you know, we don't need to follow a marketing plan. So that just kind of some of the themes that I heard during the discussion. So what I would say is, this is kind of to the public and the people who spoke. What I didn't hear was mentioned is the view that, kind of the viewpoint from us, right? So it's like a bad news story. If you don't get out in front of it, it's going to take its own shape, you know, may grow multiple heads and turn ugly. So we've got to have some sort of plan in place. Growth is going to happen. You either manage growth or you don't manage it, and then it becomes something you don't want to have. So there has to be some sort of plan in place and consistency for us to have a roadmap. You know, this is not concrete. It's going to be very organic. It's going to be very fluid. But without a plan in place, you're going to get certain types of homes built in an area that you may not want them because there's nothing stopping that from happening. So I guess my overall comment is really, I want everybody who's speaking today and the public to know that we have to have some sort of generic roadmap in place to manage the growth, because it is going to happen, whether it's within the village, on the outskirts, in the ETJ, and the surrounding towns. It's coming, it's going to happen. So we can have conversations around preservation and conservation all day, but again, we've got to have a plan for it. Otherwise, it's going to take its own ugly form that we may not like in the end, and we can't do anything with it at that point. That's all I have right now.
Sonia?
I would like to set the record straight on the Monticello facility. We did address that at the last meeting. So I just want to make sure that the public knows that we are aware of it and that we are working on that. It's not being ignored. The other thing that concerns me, and I don't want to pick out one homeowner over another one, we did talk about Magnolia staying residential, especially those 3 lots, if you remember at the meeting. We did. And I really think those should stay residential. That's my concern there. Other than that, I'm okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for everyone who did comment. I think these processes are only, as good as the participation that we get from, the public and everyone else that wants to be involved. So thank you for providing that input. I really like what you said, Philip. This plan gives us an opportunity to get in front of really what's inevitable here. This has been my home for most of my life. In that 30 years, it's changed significantly. I think if you ask the perspective of a kid growing up here is different than the perspective of someone who's moved here to kind of enjoy the later years of their life. So I think providing a common ground for everybody to enjoy it, enjoy the resources and charm that we have, I think it is important. I like the comment that this area does. It needs to serve all of us. When you talk about we, it's not only those that live here, it's all of the visitors that we attract. It's all of the people who come from out of town to work. But it is everybody who spends every day of their life here in one way or another. That's going to change over time, and I think we need to consider opportunities that are going to, make this, most beneficial for us all. I think the most flexible uses that are going to provide housing opportunities, that's going to be important. Providing areas for businesses to open up to provide more employment opportunities, I think is going to be important. And one thing to consider, and I think one of it's great to see these beautiful pictures, but I think a lot of people are getting stuck on this is how it's going to be. That's not the case. The plans, again, give us an opportunity to kind of get in front and decide what uses, what this can be. Doesn't mean this is how it's going to look. But I agree with the general sentiment from what we've heard is, flexibility, I think would be favored here. You don't want to short side yourself on the opportunities that you can pursue. So, and also I guess a concern of prior uses, just because something says it's going to be residential as part of the plan. A prior use wouldn't, if this plan is adopted, nothing's going to get torn down while a existing use is going on. Those uses are grandfathered in. Those structures aren't going to be forced to move or relocate as long as they're, in the same ownership and operating the same way. So I do agree, affordable housing is definitely an issue in this area, Pinehurst, Southern Pines, Aberdeen as a whole. Again, I think the flexibility of opening, more of this to something other than single family throughout would hopefully alleviate some of that issue. But yeah.
Thank you. Jack?
Well, I will second those wonderful comments so far. And I just want to point out a couple things. One is these plans, as we saw them from the consultants, had lots of buildings in certain spots. And those were just to fill in the blocks, if you will. It's a mistake to think that that's exactly where a building will be, or that's exactly the way it should be designed, or something like that. The whole concept of the small area plan is nothing more than to give us a vision as to how to develop zoning and, or most importantly, the form-based codes, which will overlay this area so that we have some ability to control the look and feel and design of not only the streets, but also the buildings and the architecture and so forth. I am also favorable to as much flexibility as possible. For example, in Steve's parcel, I think it'd be a mistake to lock that down to one type of residential. Who knows whether single family and or townhouse, 2 or 3 attached makes sense. I don't know. And commercial along Magnolia, that may or not make sense. It depends on the demand and what seems to go to that spot. We really talked about quite a bit of other things I want to make people to understand. We talked about all the road structure. We talked about some of the traffic on the road structures, whether the road structure would in fact alleviate traffic or create more traffic or create pass-throughs. And so we discussed quite a bit in the past relative to these. And I will say that although we're focused only on Village Place right now, there was less concern about Village Place design and plan than just about, than Pinehurst South for sure. So overall, I thought the community felt pretty good about this design and this plan going forward. I will say that I am, as Kevin noted, I don't know how he noted this, but I feel that the expansion of the plan along the west side of Magnolia, those 3 lots for commercial infill is in conflict with the 2019 comprehensive plan, which I spent seemingly my life on for about 3 or 4 months. And the designation of that area as a focus area, and all the other plans, by the way, that have been implemented over the last 15 years. So this area now designated Village Place, specifically designated in all other plans to border on streets wherever feasible, so as not to change existing residential parcel character through rezoning of adjoining residential parcels or backyard commercial development. I'll also note that the staff was deeply involved in the development of this comp plan. So it's not something that just occurred out of a vacuum. And in addition, in the January 21 documentation, all the public workshops that were held online, including the 7 breakout rooms, the June 21 final report to the citizens, all showed the borders of the small area plans. These lots were excluded, and the western border of the Village Place was clearly shown as the text specified Magnolia Road, with the exception of the 1 parcel previously zoned for multifamily. Even in the opening presentation to the public on page 8 in the Fairbarn presentation, the plan did not include these lots. So all along, the public has been led to believe that these are not going to be included, and I think it's a mistake to change the comprehensive plan at this point in time. That's my position on that, as Kevin noted. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Luis?
I generally agree with everything that was said. And I think this is a good, solid plan. And remember, it's a comprehensive, long-range plan. It's not something that's going to happen tomorrow. I think that the public we need to educate the public even more about form-based codes, because you're not going to see the zoning, Euclidean zoning that now exists. It is very creative, and especially between the staff and who's ever developing a lot. And it takes on a whole different character, and that's why it's form-based. It's, it really is the perfect type of zoning to use in the village of Pinehurst. So I wouldn't be so concerned about those site decisions right now on individual lots. It's just, or the type of ownership, of adjacent lots or anything like that, because it really is going to be worked out. I think this is, in general, a really good plan. And it serves as a guiding principle going forward. That's what it is. It's a guide to moving forward. So I think it's a good job.
Matt?
Concur with Philip. Thanks for kicking us off so well. I mean, what Luis just said about the value of form-based code giving us that flexibility. The 2 points I wanted to highlight from comments is just to kind of restate what David mentioned of if you have a property right now that has a certain zoning and there's a building on it, the understanding of how that's going to be affected by the overlay of a form-based code is nothing would change for that property. The properties adjacent to it, as they began to develop, they would be subject to form-based code,
That's correct.
whatever it is for that street frontage.
Just like if you're currently not, I think the apartments are in the NC zone. The apartments are a non-conforming use within that district. They continue to exist, but they exist under the non-conforming rules. And they can continue to exist.
If they were going to, if they sold the property, does that change that, or
Nope.
what happens when the property?
No, change it, the nonconformity stays with the property until the use ceases in some form. So if it burns down, that might be an issue, but the use the nonconforming use stays.
Okay. So on the question of, your point in your memo on these 4 options, remind us how significant is it to determine, as part of what we're recommending to council, what the zoning is on those properties in terms of we want mixed use or we want to keep residential. Because if we're going to come in with an overlay of form-based code, what kind of flexibility do we still have in the future? How restricted are we today based on what we said there?
Well, we still have to get to the form-based code drafting, but what will happen is, say if we change this use from, look on the west side of Magnolia, to something like that, or something that allows a hybrid, we just have to understand that when we start looking at the building types that will be allowed along Magnolia Road. So if we say, we don't want any commercial building types along Magnolia Road, we're not going to include that in the regulating plan. It'll be single-family detached, it'll be single-family attached. So that's where it gets somewhat important, but we can still hammer through some of that stuff. But if it's so objectionable, if that's a use that's objectionable in some shape or form, then we should address it as far as a recommendation, and we can make some changes to some of those illustrations, because going forward, we want the illustrations to match up kind of with how we see the vision going in the future. I don't know how I can do flexibility, but you want to show what could be the most intense particular land use. But if you also want to allow single-family residential in there, we would just build that into the regulating plan.
Okay, so, and that's helpful. So right now, the 3 lots that you're kind of asking for us to clarify that are zoned R10.
They're zoned R10, correct.
And then the 3.9 above that is zoned village residential.
That is correct, sir.
So in what you're asking in these options, are you asking us to make a decision on?
Yes, I'm giving you several options so we move forward with a recommendation. So Jack, Jack had the discussion on comp plan. He's absolutely correct. So whichever way we move forward with this, so if there's consensus that this should stay residential for the reasons that were stated, then we should just, should be looking at changing this look. Again, we're still moving forward with a regulating plan. That is where we implement the actual plan. But if there's no support to keep this in this type of land use, then we should pull it off. We should change it. It shouldn't be in the final plan set. It should be changed. So that is why I set that option up for you to potentially pull that out. Same thing over here where we added the option of this could be either, we could just say we want commercial along the frontage, or we could say we'll allow commercial, or allow single-family residential, or we'll allow single-family attached. So I think the options lay that out. I think I even, let's see here. So I laid that out. So if you look at it, and I added this today as I'm putting this together, option 1, support the non-residential land use pattern along Magnolia as shown in the detail and preferred build-out plans. Because I knew those 3 lots were going to potentially come into play and be an issue, I allowed for this as also an option there, and this could be included on all of them, option to include only the single-family 3.9 acre property as a tradition site at the corner of McCaskill and Magnolia. And I put that in there because I knew that there was going to be a discussion, and I wanted there to be a consensus with at least the Planning and Zoning Board which way they wanted to go on that.
So to be clear, just to start jumping on your comments real quick, just to be clear, based upon our previous work sessions, some of the concerns that have risen to the top, you're trying to give some sort of definition to what our options are.
Correct.
So we can move forward with some steps.
Correct.
Some of those concerns, and I'll just speak on that real quick, not to jump in, but some of those concerns really haven't come up quite in this meeting, okay? And I'm okay with it because we could spend hours and hours and hours and hours and hours again. But I don't want us to forget about those concerns when we consider what our overall recommendation is going to be, okay? So I'm just going to leave it at that. But these are hot topics in our work sessions, and you're trying to give some definition to what our opportunities may be.
And maybe, and maybe it would have been better to preface that for everyone in the room.
That's what I was trying to do.
Yeah, is that, this was staff's best attempt that we could make to try to paraphrase some of the hot topics or discussions that were made at the work sessions with the group. And that seemed to be, I mean, Jack stated, there didn't seem to be as much heartburn maybe over the Village Place plan as the one we're going to get to next.
Right.
So it seemed they all, revolve around that area there along Magnolia Road. So, of course, we just laid them out the best we could paraphrase from the discussions that, based on different attendance with different members, of course, too, with those meetings we've had. And you can finagle those as you may need in order to gain some level of consensus with the group.
You didn't note in your draft staff report that this subject matter was discussed and a majority of the then attending board members voted to exclude those areas and go back to the original boundaries.
Well, we went back painstakingly and went through the minutes, went through the meeting videos, and I'll tell you, we still have the note, I believe it's on a yellow sheet of notebook paper, I can tell you clearly. And some members, not to point out anyone because I can't quite clearly remember, seem to kind of, yeah, maybe not. I favor this, I favor both. Some clearly just exclude, some clearly just residential. But it was pretty even across the board. So it wasn't clear enough where we could say a majority, 5 out of 8, 6 out of 8, 4 out of 7. It was that close.
I mean, it was kind of split. We had some hard people against, and we had some for, and then there was the gray areas in the middle. Matt, you're a gray area. And
I think this is going to be, this is going to be pretty well discussed at the council level, I'm sure. And I think what our job possibly is to do is to, if we do make a recommendation that's specific to any properties involved, to be as direct and as in line with zoning changes that could be made to this property as possible. And that's my overall feeling of where we need to be. So if we want to do, or not want to do, if we end up singling out any properties, my belief is that we need to be specific to some zoning changes that probably would be made based upon this plan direction. So that's my overall 2 cents for everybody. I mean, and I'm not driving that, but just to go back, we kind of kiboshed Matt's point, so please continue.
No, and that's it. That's it. No, yeah. I was kind of bringing us back to these points, to not restate what others have said, but to make sure it was clear. And after what Louise said, honestly, I wanted to just make sure I was clear on, the importance of what we do today and what it prohibits us from in the future and what it doesn't prohibit us from in the future. And I think I'm clearer on that. Honestly, looking at the options, if we say we wanted the most flexibility, I'm guessing option 4 is the most flexible because it says non-residential or single-family attached or detached.
Back to the options, please.
There you go.
You already on there? Oh, thanks.
Although your caveat on option 1 might make that one,
It was,
second most flexible.
it was a point of discussion, so that's why I felt, it was necessary to be placed on there as an option.
Can we get some clarity for the board, what is in place currently if we were to choose no option that's on your board in the plan? Either or right now, right? You could go.
I'm sorry, Jeremy.
So if we were to choose no option, what's in the plan currently?
The current,
I have a clue, but I would like that
that's
to be
currently,
defined for everybody.
this is currently in the plan.
Currently in the plan.
Correct.
Okay. Wanted that to be stated. Matt, was that it?
Well, let me wrap, and I'll
Please.
just say,
No, please
based
don't.
on our discussion, when we talked about this area 2 meetings ago, I was willing to get behind these 3 lots remaining residential, and then, I value mixed use or whatever is the most flexible use on the larger parcel there, so that's kind of where I would come back to, because I think that was the tenor of our discussion.
Whenever someone feels compelled to start forming a motion, and I'm not asking for right this second, but I'm going to go ahead and mention that. Staff has prepared some procedure and motion templates for us, so please go ahead and start to review them as we continue our conversations and deliberations. So we can consider any specific zoning direction on any specific properties that you may want to indicate in this plan. But I have kind of a question for staff. Can you help us all in the room understand what are the next steps of implementing a plan? What are the next steps after this plan? And where do we go from here?
We go from here to the actual developing the form-based code and doing the underlying zoning changes that we need to do to the zoning map. So, some of the properties that you'll see, or some of the recommendations that you see in the actual plan, it doesn't line up with the underlying zoning, so we have to deal with the underlying zoning. And then we also have to look at some of we're going to probably have to do some individual PDO amendments to implement that. So there's a couple things in play. We're going to have to make some adjustments to the PDO, and we've already been working on that. And we're going to, then when we create the FBC, we're going to have to, it's going to be an overlay district for now. So it's going to have to be applied as an overlay district. Meaning, the underlying zoning is going to lose, it's going to be more of a hybrid code.
You might take Louise's help there a little bit.
Oh, I will.
Okay.
Take your all help, but this will be more of a hybrid code. A true form-based code really gets rid of, it doesn't deal with uses in favor of the form. I know that not controlling uses within the community is not going to be something that's acceptable. So we're going to keep it as it's going to be a hybrid code where we do control some of those uses. So that's what will be in the plan. So as we start developing the regulating plan, which is the important part of, one of the more important parts of the plan, that's where we have to look at what zoning changes will occur. So if we look at this property right here along Magnolia, this is what is a zone, village residential, and it doesn't allow for multiple, it doesn't allow for non-res in this area, does it? So this wouldn't allow, this zoning district wouldn't allow for non-residential. This, those 3 residential properties are zoned R10. None of this could develop with the current zoning. So we have to make changes with the form-based code and with the underlying zoning to make that occur.
Although they could be rezoned in the future, commercial, and included in the overlay zone, is that correct?
And a rezoning request would need to come before us.
Correct. And we don't have to do this in one fell swoop either when we start putting that overlay on. So we can go to those areas that we think, that we see that there's most, if we do a SWOT analysis and we see the areas that are more likely to develop, which are going to be vacant, things like that, those are areas that we want to look at and say, yeah, we might want to just apply the zoning in that district right now because there's a threat of not being able to implement the plan. So we'll take a look at that. And we've already been looking at that, but that will be our next steps.
I'm a little confused as to what this particular drawing is showing, like on the 3.9 acre parcel at the corner of McCaskill and Magnolia. Is this showing non-commercial, or is it showing residential, or is it showing commercial? I mean, it's not clear to me what it's showing.
I think it shows both. This appears, this could be SFA, single-family attached. This looks like it's.
Yeah, I'm talking about at the corner there.
Oh, here?
More up there, yeah.
Right at the corner? That could be a commercial, or that's probably, yeah, it's non-residential. So that could be a mixed-use building, or it's, it could be a mixed, looks like it's a mixed-use building type pattern.
We get to that zoning request for that specific area in that parcel, that's where our, the zoning overlay on that property would then change.
No, the overlay is going to stay the same. When we do the FBC, what's going to happen with the FBC is there's going to be a building type that will be allowed in various blocks. So whether it be a townhouse or SFA, single-family attached, single-family detached, when we have a regulating plan, it will allow these types of building types to be in that area. So when we start to create that overlay district, it'll be a type 1 building or type 4 building, whatever, depending on what's in that regulating plan. It's confusing now because you're not looking at it. So,
Can form-based codes apply to single-family detached dwellings?
This particular part's in the historic district, so we have that in our favor here. But it depends on what portion of the form-based coding. If you're talking about any of the design elements as defined in the statutes outside of historic districts, no.
Let me ask another question, which is sort of a hot topic. Is it possible to apply a zoning requirement or a prohibition in any one of these overlays that you will be creating, that we'll be creating? This is either the zoning or the form-based codes that would prohibit a lease of a residential structure for less than 6 months.
I think that's a
it's
different ordinance.
Yeah. Well, that's one of those user and use things. And
You know why I brought that up.
Of course, yeah. But
I don't know the answer to that.
we don't.
Some of that still remains to be seen, Jack. But back to Jeremy's question, and this might be the
Getting off the hot seat there a little bit.
yeah. I mean that's not a decision that staff can tell. That's not an answer we can give you.
But have you ever heard of that? That's what I was going.
The tradition site, that 3.9 acre parcel, to be able to focus on that might be the best option that we can visualize what happens after some form of a plan is adopted. We know what the base zoning is now. We know what it allows. We know what it doesn't allow. So let's say if option 1 is what is recommended, and you favor the flexibility of the uses there, well, that's where if we need to go and reevaluate that base zoning to allow for what type of specific uses we'd like to see, and then the overlay will be dropped on. We'll have the form-based coding that Darren talked about based on what type of building then as the streets come in, what type of blocks, what type of lots, what type of wrapping, what type of fenestration. Then you start building it now from the site, as Louise talked about, up.
But going to the other comments that were made previously, isn't it best to allow for the maximum flexibility in use of this, for example, this parcel?
Well, it depends on
Then-
how
And then
flexible.
use the form-based code to hopefully, get the best design, whatever the use is?
It depends on how flexible you want to be. Do you want to be flexible enough to allow, say, multiple family in that area, a multiple family building? So if that's not the case, then we don't include that as a building type in that area. So, yeah, flexibility is great, but you're going to want to have some limitations to that flexibility, I would assume. The other thing why it's important that we kind of get it right on these base plans is that as we're starting to craft the form-based code and zoning changes, when we're looking at it and we go, well, we showed that a commercial potentiality over here, and we're not including that in the form-based code. Why aren't we doing that? It doesn't require us to put it in there, but it raises a question why we might not be doing it. So if the interest is not on those 3 parcels for that, that doesn't mean that, again, they can't be rezoned, they can't be added. But if they're not in there, then the starting point is we don't include it, Jim.
Well, I mean, does it make sense to take a parcel, and we're using the 3.9 acre parcel as an example? I mean, can you specify some of it can be residential and some of it can be commercial, and only the commercial can only be on a frontage of these 2 streets or something to that effect?
If that's what we want to do,
That restrictive, though, I mean, tell you the truth.
we can do that. I think we can build the overlay that way. We can do that because we can divide it into blocks.
I mean, not all mixed use is the same. I mean, it could be residential, commercial mixed use, and it could be designated, but, the important things are not, probably the height of the building in that area is more important to the form-based code than what's inside it.
Right.
I mean, you're not going to allow industrial, but you might allow a mix of residential and commercial or office or something like that. But it's more about how the community looks, I think.
It is,
And how-
it's heavy.
And we're a village, and we want to remain a village, so we're not going to have some skyscraper.
Do we want this pattern? So we have a non-residential here. I think we want to prescribe this residential pattern up along Cadell, because I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I think that was supportive because of the.
Yeah, could you
Because
build
of
that
the-
on Cadell? I mean, what's the drop off?
Yeah, it does drop off pretty good. But from a land use standpoint, would you want to put a mixed use on the top of Cadell right here adjacent to those residential homes?
But you have a street border.
You do have it's across from the street. We generally, from a planning
You don't
standpoint.
have a backyard.
We try and align uses on each side of the street. So, I mean, if additional flexibility is desirable on this piece, we can design it that way as well. So we can be as limiting as we want, or we can be as flexible as we want. But we start with this kind of land use pattern. That's how we'll start crafting it. The details are up to us. Let us figure out how to implement those details. You tell us what's the appropriate vision for the future of this area. Let us make that work. We're the guys who have to implement it too.
So just for some clarity, kind of back to my point, because I want to make sure that we, as much as we can, kind of simplify the process. So the next step is forming form-based codes.
Correct.
And the structure.
Correct.
Okay. And then after that, we'll get into some PDO and some baseline.
We'll be doing it both at the same time.
All at the same time. Can you give us a time frame in your envision upon this?
Well, I need to get the blessing of the council before we start moving on that. So I want to get the blessing of the council, and I'm hoping Village Place has less objections, and we can hit the ground running on the form-based code and the PDO updates for the Village Place area. We will handle Pinehurst South somewhat separately, but if there's general consensus without, there's some sticking points here on Village Place, I want to hit the ground ASAP right now.
It kind of brings me to my overall kind of points, because I want to make sure that us as a board have vetted this enough and made sure that we have identified the concerns so we can pass it onto council with a recommendation that gives plenty of insight and some thought process of our board. And so that was why initially when I started the meeting, I wanted to make sure that we were prepared to give a recommendation. I think that's always our first question to ourselves is, are we prepared as a board to give any sort of recommendation? That's why I kind of prefaced with that and what that recommendation may be. What is it? And we've spent a lot of hours on this, not as many hours as the comprehensive plan, but a lot of hours on this. And that was why when some of the concerns from our public comments come up, I do feel a little bit better because I do know that we've kind of beat these things up a little bit, certainly being the Cadell Road, single-family houses on the backside and looking out and seeing a parking lot and those type of concerns and what those kind of lots should be. But to me, this plan is kind of a theory, and I'm going to use Louise's words as a guiding principle for really what the next step process is. And that's why I wanted to kind of bring that up. And the plan is very illustrative towards kind of sort of a horizon scanning of what could happen if this overall theory is, the zoning direction is adopted and driven. And I think it's important for us to understand that a plan is not a new plan per se. It's a new direction. And currently, all of our zoning in this area actually provides for a plan. It would be hard for you to probably define it as such, I would probably imagine. But there's also a separate horizon scanning of what would happen in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years if we stay in place or if we continue what our overall zoning would be. And I think our true question, and by no means do I say back up and go get some, these people back involved, but what are the differences? What in our minds we're going to have to imagine, what are the differences? What would those differences be? And we talk about, market pressures, and we talk about developers and outside developers and all the things that could happen. And I think that for me, that's what's important, is this plan driving towards what our community is desiring, wanting, as well as what our capabilities are. And I want to make sure that I define community because I think overall in Moore County, in argument, is our community. What happens in Southern Pines directly affects us. What happens in Pinehurst directly affects everybody else. We are such a series of small towns creating one other small town. And when we get into uses of what we need, in Pinehurst, a lot of times it's duplicating of the same uses that may be 5 miles away in another municipality. And I think that's something for us to consider and remember. Sorry for some other things that may come up. But, for me is does this plan support the direction that our current residents want? And something also for me to consider, is this always supporting our retirement settler? Because I understand the whole concept of the changing demographics, but we have a certain niche in our area that's always been attractive to a retirement settler. And are we always going to be attractive to a retirement settler? There's a lot of competition for that. And when we start talking about cost of a family in a community, I have a child, okay? So my wife have a job, I have a job. So we use the roads more. We certainly, pay the taxes. We use the village more. We use all of this stuff. So the retirement settler really has a lot of advantages, which I never want to make sure that we create something that is not attractive. Because when these retirees make that decision to move somewhere to retire, there's a lot of competition, really, that's truly out there upon our community. Certainly when we're this close to to beach communities and, what's available to them in South Carolina. So I think that's something, although I'm very supportive that Pinehurst has always been for the everyman, at the same point in time, we need to understand that that's unique for us, and I don't want to lose that. So it's always in the back of my mind as we consider this type of direction and this type of plan. So for me, that's really what I kind of drive into, and I wanted to make sure that I kind of just mentioned for everybody. So us as a board, as we kind of move forward, let's go and start thinking about if we're prepared to make any sort of
I want to ask
Please, go
a
ahead.
question.
Questions?
If the motion is to approve the plan, what are we approving? I mean,
You're not- we're
are we
direct-
approving the preferred build-out diagram
Yes.
plan? Is that, okay.
That's why-
I want to
and
make
that-
sure, because there's 2 or 3 different plans in here,
But,
okay?
but they all generally line up.
Well, yeah, line up, but the preferred build-out plan gives
Right.
some diagram. For example, it implies that along Rattlesnake Trail, only commercial infill would be normally allowed. Is that correct?
Correct.
It implies that on the 3-point-acre lot, both commercial and residential would be permitted. Is that correct?
Well, right now that'd be a mixed use, so we're not showing that flexibility on the east side of Magnolia on that 3.9 acre piece right now. We're showing non-residential along there.
Well, you don't imply that those bigger buildings on that lot are residential, are you?
These,
Those 3, yeah?
these are non-residential.
So you're implying commercial and residential.
I'm playing residential over here
What am I missing?
and non-residential here. So
I
it'd
see.
be mixed use, commercial, but
Okay,
if we want to
so-
allow for residential,
So you're implying that that would be a mixed-use parcel, is that
yes,
correct?
yes.
Okay. And you're also, now, I'm setting aside the 3 lots here
Sure.
for a second, because I don't think those are a big question for this plan.
Sure.
You're also implying that the core, which is, as we all have seen, and everyone fell in love with the core, and all the restaurants and the shops and everything that was going to be there, that, of course, depends upon the village moving the public services.
Correct.
Of course, the Moore County moving the tank and all
That's
that, the
correct.
rest of their facility and so forth.
Correct.
So there's a lot of dependencies here. So that's what we would be normally approving. Okay, I'm just trying
Recommending?
to understand, to say we approve the plan.
Recommending?
What does it really mean?
Yeah, what's the plan here? It's this pattern. If we were, because remember, what's going to happen next, Jack, if we get this?
No, I got you.
Yeah.
So it's this pattern that we are suggesting that we are
Correct.
approving. Okay.
Because if we go through with this, it gets approved by council. When we come back with that regulating plan and we start to show the future building types, remember, existing buildings can exist as nonconformities. The future building types will show, we want this type of office, we want this type of mixed use. We don't want single family detached in this particular area because we might not be able to control the architectural quality. things
So
like that.
they will be, assuming that they also go along with this plan,
Hmm?
they will be evaluating the regulating documents such as zoning and the form-based code against this concept.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's how you use the plan. So,
Okay.
yeah, use this plan for phase 2, which is doing those it's also used for things like, look, do we need to put a sidewalk here? Should we connect this area up with a
No,
sidewalk?
I understand. I
Or
was just trying to
blah, blah,
get,
blah.
I was.
Yep, no,
just
you're right.
wanted some clarity in my mind. Maybe
You're right.
everyone else could figure it out, but I had a little trouble.
You're right, Jack.
Hey, Jack, kind of on that point too, something else that's kind of always in my thoughts and important to me is I want to make sure that if we move forward with a plan like this, we're not putting ourselves in any sort of future compromising situation for any unforeseen concerns. It really, I guess this is for everybody.
I
but-
guarantee you there's unforeseen concerns.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Can you, and that's, we always know that's going to happen.
Guarantee.
So to sit here today and try, we know there's going to be some, and we said, golly, we never could have guessed that. But in your thought process, moving forward with this sort of plan, is there anything in this plan that can get us as a village in any of those compromising situations, kind of in the future? I mean, that's kind of what I would like to hear from everybody.
I don't see it.
Could
but
we see
myself.
the options up there one more time, please?
So I'm kind of leaning towards, based on our discussion, option 4, which basically would allow what you have shown, but also would allow it to be residential rather than commercial along Magnolia, right?
Correct.
It doesn't preclude what you have shown, but it just allows those.
It allows either or, so we just have to, when we start crafting FBC and regulating plan, we keep that in mind, that we want to build that flexibility in there.
I'm
But
seeing,
does that exclude commercial along?
No, it says support non-residential or single-family attached or detached along the Magnolia Road frontage, retaining the single-family detached pattern to the west, to the Cadell Road side of it.
I would add to that, with the exception of going back to the original boundary of the focus area.
That would be,
I'd like to comment on that. I'm under the impression that those 3 lots are Mr. Drum's. the 3 lots for the boundary area?
I'll allow a quick one, Kevin, please. It's okay.
Doctor, and I was in clinic all day, and I left early to try to get here, but I didn't realize the meeting was going to be about our 3 lots. And I'm wondering why, when we're looking at this, since I've been here, it's all about our 3 lots. If it was about one of our lots, or 2 of our lots, or somebody else's lot, and maybe my lot, I could maybe wrap my head around it.
It's just because they're the 3 that are on the edge of this plan that weren't included in the 2019
It
comp
could
plan.
be.
No, that's,
I guess you guys probably know better than I do why those 3 lots are being singled out for such intensive discussion. And Mr. Webster said, nobody cares about the people on Caudell Road, because we all know the mayor lives up there. So
It's-
nobody cares about his neighborhood.
it's solely the difference between the 2 comp plans. Or I guess the initial plan that this drew, the line shifted those 3 lots. That's the only thing that changed, which is the only reason that they're considered.
And having commercial development in the backyard of existing single-family houses. We don't need any more discussion.
Yeah, I was going to say, I would like to kind of go ahead and close it, and I'm sorry for that, but just to kind of
Well,
keep the decorum.
I
of
just
the
want to say
room.
one thing. Those 3 lots are facing that CenturyLink warehouse building. That's what we're facing across the street.
Yeah.
And you have said it's important to have continuity on both sides of the street.
Well, that's.
Not backyard to backyard, but across the street. I heard that several times
Yeah.
tonight. And that's what we're facing, a big brick industrial building.
And 2 new roads.
Thank you.
2 new roads.
I was just
Thank you.
confirming.
Added 2 new roads.
Yeah.
If you're not adding those roads, ours is quasi-residential. You now have doubled us in the commercial.
Kevin, thank you. I'm really sorry. I want to keep the decorum.
I
of
was
the room.
just confirming that the owners of those lots seem to be, in agreement with the plan. They were part of the plan to allow that commercial development there. So I think that was important to point out.
With the exception that the public, for 2 years, has been told that the boundaries are such. And I think it's a mistake to tell the public one thing and do something else.
I would also bring up that those 3 commercial lots were called out specifically by public comment in previous meetings, which is why they've been brought up again.
Yep.
Those were the only 3 that were brought up specifically in public comment. That's the only reason we're talking about them so much. Otherwise, I don't think they would have come up.
Kevin, I'll kind of address this here real quick. I really don't think it's prudent for us as a board to get into any sort of stating why the 3 lots have become a discussion point. I don't think we needed to defend that per se. I mean, I have all the respect for the world for everybody involved. To me, it became, I'll speak from me, it became the thought process of where currently today is a good stopping point along that road, and it's unfortunate that the 3 lots kind of became that stopping point discussion, if you guys remember that. And for me, the concern in reality always was, where was the prudent stopping point in consideration today of the homes on Cadell Road? And with the parking being in the rear as illustrated, now we know that that's, the width of that area, to me, would be a concern. And that was where my mindset was going. And so where's the stopping point and when and how? And so I really want to keep us moving towards some sort of, recommendation here, if at all. And so if we need to have some further discussions on those 3 lots as pertain to this plan and as pertain to if someone wants to make a recommendation of what they are, when that recommendation is made, I really do hope
that if anyone is convicted upon this board to disagree with that recommendation, to, at that point, for us to have that discussion and provide an alternate motion, okay? Is that kind of a prudent way to address this? Because I don't think for us as a board, we need to bring into any sort of the political nature of it all. I want us to keep it down to the base, to the zoning fact of the theory and where we're basing our thoughts.
I'd like to go ahead and make a motion.
Ooh, great, please.
I move that the Planning and Zoning Board recommend the Village Place Small Area Plan to the Pinehurst Village Council for adoption with revisions based on the following option: that we support the non-residential or single-family attached or detached along the Magnolia Road frontage, retaining the single-family detached pattern to the west.
Do you want to continue your, is that the end of your motion?
That's the end of my motion.
I'll second it.
So we have a motion as provided by David Almazzoro and a second by Luis Mercuro.
I'd like to make an amendment to the motion.
Want to accept an amendment to the motion, or I'd say let's go ahead and vote upon that unless he's willing to hear.
We usually, yeah, you'd have to vote on whether or not, well, people will accept the amendment to the motion. Of course, you have to hear what the amendment is first.
Right. Yeah, okay. All right, let's hear your amendment.
I would amend the motion to include the statement that the boundary of the small area plan will revert to the initial boundary as designed in the focus area and the original plan as shown to the public in 2021.
Second. Second.
Second?
Okay, Matt's going to second that amendment. Vote on the amendment first.
You must vote on the
That,
amendment.
and just for everybody's recollection, that
Yeah, please.
what it does is it does take these lots out of play, and it keeps this as the original, because it was, as Jack had said, in the original 2019 comprehensive plan. So that is the impact of the amendment, just so everybody understands that. The amendment would take these out, retain them as residential.
And point of clarification, when this says single family or attached, so just want to make it clear, we're talking about strictly on the west side of that road.
That is correct, sir. East side's commercial.
Does not take that 3.9 acre parcel out of the small area plan.
No.
Right, okay.
No, it takes this area.
All right, let's vote on the amendment by roll call vote, beginning with Philip and coming around.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
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 We have 5 yeses and 1 no, so the amendment stands.
The amendment becomes part of the initial motion.
Amendment becomes part of the initial motion, so now let's go ahead and make a roll call vote on the overall motion. Again, starting on my right with Philip.
What am I voting on?
So would you want to go ahead and restate your motion?
David made a motion.
Option 4.
For option 4.
Option 4.
It's been amended now to put the original boundary back. So it's option 4 with the original boundary.
I don't know how it's any different than the yes I just said, so yes.
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 All right, so we have 5 for yes, 1 for no. The motion carries.
Thank you. That will be the recommendation.
Or the recommendation. Thank you, guys. It is now 5:30, about 5:38. Let's go ahead and take a break as a board. Let's go ahead and reconvene here at 5:45.
We're not done?
No, we're not done.
Oh.
I'm sorry about your birthday. Please, everybody say happy birthday. All right, welcome back, everybody, as we begin the second portion of tonight's Planning and Zoning Board meeting for the Village of Pinehurst, North Carolina. The second part of our meeting, we're going to address the Pinehurst South Small Area Plan. So at this time, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Darren until Alex joins us as well.
Well, he won't participate right now.
Yeah, you don't participate.
So Pinehurst South is what, approximately 200-acre planning area on the village's south side. It was included in a small area plan process because in a 2019 comprehensive plan, one of the recommendations was to create a small area plan for this area. The importance of planning in this particular area versus even the Village Place areas, this area has more actual developable land within it. So you've got a lot of vacant developable land, especially south of Blake Boulevard. I think we've got about 30 to 40 acres of vacant land below Blake Boulevard. And on the west side, almost direct due west from that area, there's a lot of land that's currently zoned multiple family that is vacant. So what we thought it was important to create a plan for that area. So this again is a bird's eye rendering of the area. So it kind of shows what this area could develop out in 50 years based on some of the absorption and the amount of square footage that we actually shown in this plan. You can see one of the major add-ons as we started to develop and get some of the public input on this plan was this development of this proposed central green area on the south side of Blake in that mixed use area that we will have some discussion on. We're showing the residential pattern to the south, commercial and office to the north. We show the potential, and this is what we're really kind of excited about, the potential of a shared use path along the railroad right-of-way as a Rails with Trails type program, which the railroad, Aberdeen, Carolina Western, has shown some openness to a concept, which is, I can tell you, from a railroad standpoint, it's very refreshing. So we got that, and we're showing creation of this proposed core area to the north, and that's kind of around the area where the Boys and Girls Club currently is. So we're showing that as being the potential activity center. We're also showing in the plans a potential to realign Monticello it's not proposed for a possible relocation of any or part of the public services complex into that area, which, as again, I will note, the current zoning, regardless of this plan, would permit for that to occur. Monticello, if we realign it, this is one of those areas where the village would have to acquire that right away. So that would be something where we'd have to acquire to make it larger. We don't have to make it larger, but it just gives more space if we actually want to do that. The plan does not make the public services locate to that site any more than it can locate right now. Here, in this particular set of plans, we had kind of a low intensity plan and a higher intensity plan. The low intensity plan focuses more on detached single family uses. As you can see in this multiple family area, we're showing the potential that you could put, detached single family uses in that area. They're currently allowed in this RMF zone, but we show that potential. And in the higher intensity plan, we show more higher intensity uses like multiple family in this area. We're showing attached single family in this area. Here's that central green. You can see it's a connected green. We're trying to connect to various areas. We're trying to connect to the new subdivision that's under construction review right now. So those are things that we're looking at. Monticello, this relocation again to the south. This relocation opens up the possibility that we could create some commercial or mixed use buildings over here at the corner. And next thing I just talked about a little bit was that the potential for a mixed use or shared use path within the railroad corridor. This is a potential design. It is no means, this has not been designed out. We've not looked at it. We don't know because we have to get some of them to embrace some of this concept before we get to the engineering detail, which, Matt, you'll love it when we're doing that. So this is just showing the concept of what that could look like if we could make that work. This is that park detail. So as the planning process progressed, I think this was an offshoot of some of the comments that we got off of Public Workshop 2. They said, well, let's create more green space. Create more green space in the Pinehurst South area. So we went back to the drawing board and we created kind of the central green area, could be central green, or central green south, whatever, that shows a mixed use development pattern around that particular area. So it shows attached single families, and it shows some commercial to the north. So it just shows a mixed use, it shows a potential mixed use area. The one thing I do want to mention about the whole park thing, even if we show a park on a plan, if we show it on a map, that, once again, it doesn't make the park happen. There has to be a subsequent action. Either we have to do some acquisition to buy that park, or we have to incentivize that to the developer as they're developing these pieces of land. This is that proposed core area around the Boys and Girls Club. So you can see what we're trying to create over here. There's a retail coffee shop that could go in this area. There's a garage structure that they thought could be a market incubator space. You can see like a little farmer's market out here. That would create and liven up that area. We show a potential restaurant over here, office space. So this is kind of would be that core area that could be the activity center for the south part, Pinehurst South. This is an overhead view kind of that core area. Again, showing this would be the coffee shop. This would be the market incubator area, restaurant, offices, that kind of stuff. You can see the gray shading is the existing development in the area. So in this part of Pinehurst South, it's relatively well developed with uses. You got a bunch of office uses along Parker, but there is room to add some of these new buildings and create some more activity in that area. I've already talked to one of the property owners in this area, and they were intrigued by this particular rendering. They like this rendering and the concept that it shows. This shows the potential, again, relocation to Monticello, and you can see how we're proposing that we could create additional office space along Monticello. We could do that for we could do that for village use if we wanted to do that, or if we had to go through the process of obtaining street right of way, we could sell land to actually recoup some of those costs. So it's just in there again as a concept. So from a recommendation standpoint, we didn't. Oh, wrong one. I don't want to rehash that. All right, Pinehurst South. Pinehurst South, there was not as many. There wasn't as many changes for options, but it's a very easy option to discuss. It's, do you want residential in this area, residential mixed use, or you do not? So, and I'll get back to the map in a minute. So option 1, support the deviation from the comprehensive plan. We all know it's a deviation from the comprehensive plan. And addition of the residential uses south of Blake Boulevard, and I tried to help you out if you're reading this, as identified on pages 72 and 73 of the plan. Is that helpful, Matt? All right. Option 2, recommend changing the proposed residential land use pattern south of Blake Boulevard as identified on pages 72 and 73 of the plan to a non-residential development pattern. So what that would do is that would change, so we'd change that illustration and show, here, let me get to that, I hope I put it there. So the area in question that we're talking about, for everybody's concern, is really this area on the south end of the Pinehurst South planning area. The original comp plan recommendation was to create this innovation campus of maybe medical sciences, life sciences, these type of uses in this area. As we looked at it, we didn't think the innovation hub, we didn't think we had the characteristics for an innovation hub, but we do think that we have the characteristics to do something like a Gulf industry cluster in this area. The plan itself allows for that to occur. I think we're showing 250,000 square feet of potential offices in that area, but we created more of a mixed use concept to just add some residential to support some of that usage. So what that does to the recommendation in the comp plan and what that does to this plan is it adds additional residential at the expense of the future potential commercial in that area. So what I want to get to, I want to get back to this area. So the recommendation right now in the plan is for this mixed use pattern that's being shown. Based on the discussions that we had and will continue to have, there is some concern about changing this land use away from this pattern, which is that office commercial pattern. So if we choose one of the options that adjusts this pattern and just it creates that, it does force, it forces this pattern down, that's what the change would do to this plan. So that has been one of the issues that from a planning and zoning standpoint and some of the comments that we've heard from the public has been a concern. So that would be one of the options. On these two particular plans, I got some email today from a couple property owners. One was the property owner of the RMF over here, I think it's Bill Reeves. He was concerned that our low intensity plan showed single family. He was worried that we were downzoning it. We're not downzoning it. I explained to him that we're not downzoning his plan as part of this plan. And he was also concerned about, and I got a concern from a gentleman from the VGA about a potential sidewalk through their property, and it's right here. So if you look at,
Just to jump in real quick, just to reiterate as well, we've been given, each board member has been given a copy of those, okay? Just to state that as
so
well.
I'm kind of showing where those areas were. And this area right here, this was in question, kind of the sidewalk connection through this area from Trotter Hills to this village-owned kind of parkland over here. What it does is, and the reason why we put it on the map was just to extend and be able to provide some cross-connection from the Trotter Hills area over into the park area. So just as a way of getting there. We also show a potential connection to the north from Trotter Hills. When we look at plans, we try and better connect areas. You can see around the harness track, we're trying to provide a connection around that area. When we're doing the Pinehurst, remember when we were doing the Pinehurst Village or Pinehurst Cottages plan, we tried to figure out how we could get a connection over to the Mahaley tract over here in the west, and they provided us with an easement to do that. And you can see the way this plan aligns with that. It hooks into that area to provide this pedestrian connection. We also required that connection to Arnett Street. The developer has created a street stub or a street easement to that area. So when we look at plans, we try and find ways that we can better connect some of these areas. So this one, the gentleman was objecting to the inclusion of that potential sidewalk in that area. I think part of it is because we've seen a potential development plan for that area for a parking lot. Now, as I explained to the gentleman, whether we show that we could simply move it sidewalk to the north. We could move it any way to the north. We were just trying to figure out and show the concept of how we could get a sidewalk connection from this area to the adjacent park. Area. We also show a connection this way off of Trotter, up along. I think there's a. I forget how wide the path is along here that you could actually connect into that area. So that was from my standpoint, that was really some of the only concerns that I've heard on this one. I did get some concern from some of the people who are in this condo complex. Right now, Page Road is a private street. I think when we start to look at the way things lay out in this area, it actually, when you start to look at the parcel lines, it looks like a public street. So I think when we started to craft this thing, we simply showed the extension of Page Road to the south. Well, right now, this is all in private hands. So that just is something that we have to be cognizant of, and it doesn't mean that a road can't go there. We're still recommending from a circulation standpoint that would be a good thing to better connect this area. But it doesn't have to happen to make this plan work. Again, all these roads are not, this is not a map. We're not officially mapping these roads. It shows the way this area could potentially come together if, say, You know, these people, this developer, say the developer of this land wants to work with these people to put something in here. This allows for that to occur. So, with that, we're back to the two options, and any other options you all would like to discuss, but I'm going to pull up which one, Jack? Oh, yeah. Oh, that's right. Sorry.
We're going to let you jump that. We're not going to let you off that hot seat.
So, I'm sorry, I should have did this in two presentations. So this is kind of the land use plan. This is what will really be, you know, I think you're going to be focusing. You might focus on some of these other areas, but this will be the focus of the discussion. Whether this land use is retained, or whether we adjust it and change it to this land use, the kind of things that you're seeing in blocks B, C, D, and E. So with that, I will end the presentation, and Jeremy, take over.
Darren, thanks.
And I'm
Thank
out.
you for that. So now let's go ahead and move into the public comment portion of this thing. And so I'll go down the list again. So Lynn, you got to forgive me. I'm embarrassed the second time with you. Please tell me your last name again, because I will need to remember. They say that the average person takes 8 times. I'll try to make it 2.
Okay, I'm not so good with names either. Lynn Goldhammer, 11 Salem Lane. When I come to these things, whether it's here or city council, I find myself always speaking against most any development in town. And I just want to give a little background as to why. I'm retired military, and my second to the last duty station in early 2000 was Seattle, Washington. I was friends with this one fellow who told me he bought his house in Kenmore, Washington, next town over, in 1998 for $98,000. 4 years later, it's worth $450,000. When I retired and moved to New Jersey, I saw a house I wanted to buy. It had last sold in 1998 for $108,000. It was now $400,000 in 10 years, and I don't think it took 10 years for it to quadruple. I think it was more like 4 to 6 years that it quadrupled. And since I've moved here 8 years ago, I'd say property values have about doubled. Incomes haven't. What I noticed back in Seattle after things skyrocketed like that, so did the homeless population, so did tent cities. I was also in East Bay after that, in Alameda, California, East Bay of San Francisco. And that's another area that the prices in that area of California went up incredibly high, and higher than people who were living there and working there could afford anymore. Even this area here where you mentioned the Boys and Girls Club, that was where the Elmore Furniture Company was, and they went out of business because their rent was doubled. It didn't go up 10% or something like that. It was doubled. And then how can a nonprofit afford to be in there when a retail couldn't, and you could make at least tax money off the retail place? So we're putting businesses out. We're going to start putting the people who live here out. And meanwhile, what you're really doing is trying to accommodate people who are in completely other areas of the country where they make a whole lot more money to come down here because, oh, a $500,000 house is so cheap. It isn't for us. I even saw one of the people here advertising the properties here up in Washington, D.C. They're trying to bring that big money down here. But does it make our area nicer? Does it make it more livable? Does it make it, and even when we had the Scamapalooza, your fellow there showing this beautiful rendition of what these small area plans could be, I said, you know, I've been seeing these all across America, and one thing that always struck me about them is they're not affordable. They're very expensive. And he said, well, yeah, it will be very expensive. But meanwhile, he was pushing it that we needed this for young people because they like a walkable downtown, and for older people that when they're no longer driving, they'd be able to live and walk. But meanwhile, these aren't affordable to those demographics. This is affordable to people who don't already live here. And I just want to say, I know I can't stop it, but I'd like you to start thinking about that. Like, what do you want this to be in the future? And on both of these things, one thing I'd like to say is if you wanted to put those commercial areas in, okay, but why not keep the housing zoning the same? So you don't have to increase that many more houses. There doesn't have to be 100 more housing units here with 8 average car drives per day per household, bringing it up to 800 cars, plus commercial property, bringing in hundreds of more cars and dumping all of that onto Route 5.
Being pretty liberal with the time, I understand, but thank you.
Once we change it, we can't change it back.
Thank you very much. Blake Webb.
Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this
Welcome.
evening. I work with the landowner of the 27-acre Mahaley tract that's dead center in the middle of this focus area, and have been around the conversation for the past several years as the plan's been evolving. Would like to mention too that I live in Pinehurst, ETJ. I travel Highway 5 multiple times a day, every day. I am a native of our fine community, so I understand the arguments that I've been hearing. They're not new. I don't expect they're going to change anytime in the future. But with regards to this tract, I'm here on behalf of the landowner this evening just to say that the two options that are on the board this evening, I think that they can appreciate both of those options. They've been trying to sell this property since her husband passed in 2014. The interest level, as I'm sure you can imagine, and everybody in the room can imagine, is extremely high in that area. If green space is what the community desires and wants, the owner is in favor of it. You know, it's beautiful. He's helped establish parts where they are. He'd like to see you buy it, you know, do with it what you would like. If not, their opinion is that the mixed use would best suit that property and create opportunity for both office, for retail, and for residential alike, that an office services exclusive use would restrict that property immensely and make it very difficult for them to ultimately do anything with it. So they would ask for, they wanted me to parlay that to you for consideration. So again, appreciate your time.
Amy Damone. Welcome, Amy.
Good evening. Darren alluded to some of my comments just
Go
a
ahead
minute
and
ago.
Your address or.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm representing Community Association Services, which is located at 25 Page Street off Blake Boulevard.
Thank you.
My name is Amy Damone, and I am the Vice President at Community Association Services. CAS's company headquarters is located at 25 Page Street within the Pinehurst South development area. And while our work spans across the state, our company has called the Village of Pinehurst home for 46 years. As a community association management firm, we understand better than most the importance of sound and accurate long-term planning for any community. We're pleased to see the time and effort that the village and the staff have given to the thoughtful development of Pinehurst South. However, we also know that accuracy is important in this kind of work, and in our review, these plans we have found inaccurate information that could alter or jeopardize the intentions of these proposed plans. In these recommendations, specifically on page 53, as provided in the public plans and elsewhere throughout those recommendations, there is the proposal of the extension of what is now known as Page Street, from Blake Boulevard to Olivia Lane. While we understand the purpose of the recommendation, it is simply not a feasible plan for Page Road. Courtyard Office Park Townhome Association, which houses CAS, Page & Associates, and the Manning Corporation, own a quarter of an acre that's specifically deeded and owned and maintained by the Courtyard Office Park Townhouse Association. Deeds filed at the time of development note the specific ownership and the intended use of the lot as a parking lot. All are recorded within the Moore County Register of Deeds. I have copies of those deeds in the original plat denoting the quarter of an acre as a parking lot available for your review if you would like them. The conceptual plan that has been proposed with respect to the extension of Page Street could not be accomplished without the agreement of a 2/3 majority of the property owners in this office park to relinquish that property to turn the parking lot into a road. And I'll be candid, parking in our offices is already at a premium, and this with the space we have. I can't imagine our local business owners agreeing to a development that would eliminate parking spaces for our businesses. I think it's fair to say that this element was included as an oversight. As the recorded deeds and accompanying maps convey, Page Street does not truly extend to the layer land as depicted on the current plan. That connection could not be completed as presented due to the property owned by that townhome business association. It's a desire and request of CAS that this plan be updated to accurately reflect that data. There are other avenues from Blake Boulevard that can still provide that throughway and connection to Blake Boulevard to Olivia Lane, and we fully support those plans, as it does appear those elements of the plan are feasible. We understand that changing details of a plan such as this may take some additional time and effort. However, to proceed with a plan that cannot realistically be achieved does not serve any purpose. Should this plan and recommendation be accepted without being accurately updated, it would jeopardize future property sales and the development plans, as the expectations set forth within the plan with respect to Page Road are not attainable. That kind of misrepresentation could ultimately have a domino effect that could risk a significant portion of the future plans of Pinehurst South. The board should make a recommendation for this revision regarding Page Street tonight. Doing so will prevent from this potential reality from becoming an actual headache for the village in the future. Earlier, Darren mentioned that the plan should match the vision. We agree. And take it a step further to note that the plan should strive for accuracy. We believe in Pinehurst, and we believe in Pinehurst South, and we support the work to prepare a thoughtful plan for the development of this area. We understand this plan is a guide and a roadmap, but we also know that the accuracy in such a plan is paramount, lest the intentions and work of this plan end up being futile. As we look to the committee and to the future of Pinehurst, we thank the Planning and Zoning Committee, the Planning Department, as well as the Village Council, and we know you are dedicated to the accuracy of these plans. We look forward to any necessary revisions to this plan to reflect this flawed recommendation regarding the connection of Page Street to Olivia Lane. Thank you for your time and consideration this evening. If you'd like any copies of my documentations that I've mentioned tonight, I'll be glad to provide those to you. Thank you.
Amy, thank you. Have you provided your details to village staff in the past?
I believe Darren has spoken both with myself and CEO of CAS, John Stone. If there's any specific documentation that he or Alex need, I'll be glad to provide that to them.
Can you answer us as a board, give us a time frame on how long ago you have given that?
Was that about a month ago, Darren?
Sure, at
Yeah, something like that.
open house.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Any board member would like any copies of her details, please go ahead. Next, we have Kevin Drum, no longer in the building. If he shows up, we'll give him a chance to speak. And then, forgive me as well, we have, is it Kendall Squires? Kendall, welcome, sir. And please go ahead and state your address for us.
Good afternoon. I'm Kendall Squires. I live at 8 Royal Darnock Lane. We are not long-term people who've lived here forever. But having said that, our experience of Pinehurst goes back over 20 years. For it was in that time frame that my wife first came here to visit a friend of hers who, with her husband, have a winter house here. And she determined over the course of years that when we moved east, returned east, she'd like to live in Pinehurst. So 4.5, 5 years ago, we came for 6 months, rented a house, and then looked around and purchased our house and came back about a year later. I had thought that, and my wife had thought, that we were moving to a community that is clearly passing. Now that, for the individuals, is not necessarily anything to sway you, because you look at many factors. And I understand fully the desire of property owners to maximize their investment. We're fortunate enough to be property owners, both in this state and other states. But the push for density, which of course equates to profit, may over time prove to be unfortunate. One of the things that I have never heard, people talk about traffic, and there's just be no question that the traffic is going to be even worse than it is now. Cities in the Orient survive with far worse traffic than Pinehurst will have. But I wonder about some of the infrastructure. For instance, and I've never seen anything, even though I've tried to find out, what is the depth of the water deposit for Pinehurst? As more and more people come, what will Pinehurst do when there's a drought? As it happened, we came from the west, and people frequently ask me about the drought, and they're in a severe drought now. But the reality is that there's a water transfer system. No one in any urban area will go thirsty. I think that's one consideration. A second is, has real thought been given in terms of density to the effect of additional population on the schools and on other ancillary services, including at some point medical services? All of these things are within your purview, and I have sort of this balance of a property owner and also someone who thought they were moving to a, if you will, sylvan setting of a well-organized historic town. And I recognize the entire area is changing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Mr. John Webster, welcome again, sir.
Webster, 140 West Mackenzie. I don't really want to repeat myself, but the only thing I wanted to add really with Pinehurst South is when I look at the traffic numbers that this is going to precipitate, we're not making any new roads. So even if this takes 50 years, which it won't, we're going to fill this 5 up with an extra, 15,000 car or trips a day. I mean, we can't afford this. It's as simple as that. So please, when you're considering the different options, look for the one with the least car traffic. Thank you.
Sir, thank you very much. Mr. Lorenzo Blackman, welcome, sir. Mind just stating your address for us?
Hey, how you doing? My name is Lorenzo Blackman, 175 Olivia Lane. Okay, so I have a different set of grievances, and I think that I want to try to work some of these things out because I probably know less about any of it. The fact that I've lived here 62 years of my life, my grandmother before that died at 98 and a half about 3.5 years ago, who lived here a long time and worked for the Tufts, as a matter of fact. So I've been gone for a while. I'm 22 years of the military, retired military, been away from here quite a few years. And I come back to my area where I was born and raised, and I see not much change, and it's sad. So I'm really here to talk about my area. And things have changed, the names have changed. The South now, we've been added into extraterritorial jurisdiction, which I'm quite confused about. Because when I left here, I belonged to the county. When I come back here, it has a new name now, it's extraterritorial jurisdiction. So I gather that's a carve-out from the norm, okay? So I'm trying to really navigate through this thing and try to find out. I have 4 homes, all down in what we call Jackson Hamlet now. But in that community, it's run down. There's a lot of old houses, decrepit, they've fallen down, and there's been years and years of neglect. And I'm going to bring it to Pinehurst because we've been here for a long time together. So I don't know whose responsibility is what. I came here last week to get a permit, to get some land cleared. Well, I spoke to some people, and they told me, I said, how do you get people to fix up their homes? These homes are falling down. Nobody seems to care. And so she says, oh, well, we don't do that. You got to call Carthage. So you got to start understanding where my confusion come in at. Okay, Pinehurst has an EJ, extraterritorial jurisdiction. All of a sudden, the county says, well, we don't have it. I said, well, the village told me to call you. If you don't do it, who does it? So the whole community down there is confused about it. So I'm not here all the time, so I understand my confusion about it. So I'm here and I want to learn. Darren, Alex, I want to learn from you guys. I want to know what's going on. You know, I've been around the world, and I come back and I've seen a lot of different ways that states and, you know, even countries do business. I want to know now how we do business at home. I can't answer for all the things that's going on wrong, things that have happened over the past that are not being corrected. But at some point, guys, we got to start correcting it. Because the people down there feel neglected. They feel left out of the process. And you can probably understand if I carved something out that didn't include you. You know, when we did the extraterritorial jurisdiction, we could have annexed it even. We could have done a lot of things maybe to help the people out. We have taxed them pretty much out because the permitting process has doubled in the last several years. But again, we've been told now that you got to add so many trees. We got told that you got to add so many plants. It doesn't seem like a tax, but for poor people, that's a tax. You've been told us now that the people that are poor, that can't afford these $300,000 and $400,000 homes, they live in mobile homes. But now you tell them that you want that to be like a stable home. You put some blocks on it, you put some bricks around it. Okay, well, you know, I had one of those. It cost me all $4,500 just to do that. So again, that's a tax. So I understand that you want things to look better. I want that. I mean, I definitely want that. I've been around the world and seen some real nice places. Of course, I want my own community to look nice. It's been neglected. I want us to come together, try to do something for everybody, make everybody inclusive. This world could use a lot of that. I've been around the world fighting. I worked for General Schwarzkopf several years. I've been around the world. General Luck. I worked for many, many people. And when I come home, I feel like I came back to a time, a lost time in history, pretty much, you know. The houses are decrepit, run down. They have nothing for our kids, no parks, no building for our elderly to go to and attend. The kids throw rocks. They break glass out of old homes. Well, I think this happens mainly because we don't have anything for them to do in that area. My father, a long time ago, created many baseball teams around this area here. And so I came back, and that's the kind of thing I want to do is try to help out the community, but that community needs a lot of help. Guys, I'm just asking y'all to do right by us. Give us some help. I think that town deserves it. They've been there for a long time. A lot longer than a lot of people that are in here now even know about. So I'm asking, and I think I got a couple guys that I think we can sit down and get some things done. We got to get them done. All right, I ain't gonna take up any more time.
All right, Mr.
My
Blackman,
boss
thank
man
you.
ready to go home right there, you know.
No, I'm not.
I appreciate
I
everything.
promise you, I don't force these things. Mr. Blackman, thank you very much, okay? We appreciate all the comments tonight. We were definitely pretty liberal on time, certainly at the end, as we kind of expected.
Jeremy,
You know, a lot
can
of
we
our-
give Mr. Black to give us his phone number, so if some of us want to contact him?
Yeah, you know, certainly if he wants to give you his phone number, you know, I think that, let's let him kind of do that on the side, and you're more than welcome to go ahead and kind of do that now. But I want to go ahead and push the meeting, go ahead and take to the next step of the meeting. Mr. Black, if you would like to give that to her, that's okay, to come up and give that to her, okay? So, thanks for all the comments, we really appreciate it. So now let's go ahead and start board comments. Go ahead with Philip on my right. Yes, sorry. Would you like me to start on the other side?
Where do I
I used to
begin?
tell Leo to please start the other side as well. know if you've been there for that.
So again, same as last time I approached it, kind of wrote down some notes here as people were speaking, just because I want to actually kind of respond and address some of those issues. In regards to page to Olivia, thank you for bringing that up. My understanding, so page to Olivia, if there were any interest in that happening, the village would have to acquire land.
That is correct.
So there would be some sort of purchase agreement in place to acquire land. It wouldn't be taken involuntarily, correct?
I can't make that. I'm not going
I'm
to
trying to help you
hold
out here.
future council to
Yeah.
an action.
So
They would be compensated.
compensated, correct. So I'm going down my list here. Infrastructure, I think, again, I'm making general comments here. I think that's an excellent point. As I actually just had the county out at my house yesterday because my water pressure has dropped significantly because probably of all the development between my house and the water towers. So, I mean, that is a concern. Traffic, as we heard last time, I think Jack had mentioned that most of the traffic we see is local traffic, contained pretty much within the village. Again, I'm just speaking points here, not making opinions. Annexation, good point. Annexation, for my clarity, annexation into the village, if you're in the ETJ, is voluntary, right? It has to be a voluntary annexation, so they have to apply for it voluntarily to come in. Okay. And sir, thank you for coming to speak, because you know what? We've not heard from many people in Olivia Lane, and thank you. I mean, we've not heard from many people, and Olivia Lane's come up a lot, so I really appreciate you bringing that perspective. Thank you. Correct. Yeah, thank you for, we'll continue this conversation, I think. Yes, sir. Look, I'm going to put my opinion out there. I guess that's what you're asking me to do. I'm in favor of a low density, and I'm in favor of non-residential. I think more residential is just going to add much more cars, much more traffic, much more pull in the infrastructure. That's kind of where I sit with it. I really don't know what else to say.
Bill, just kind of follow up on that. When you say low density, where are you talking about low density? Are you talking on this? Because we're going to come to the specific discussions on these areas. Are you saying low density or non-residential in this area?
If we're talking about that area you're circling, I'm not a huge fan of the park. But you know that.
The park is.
I know, but yeah, I say low density. I wouldn't want to see, a bunch of houses in there, really. I mean, I think I'm probably changing my tune from last time.
Yeah, I need to, when you say low density, I'm thinking low density housing.
Okay,
So-
yes. I mean, I'd like to see non-residential
All
in
right,
there.
that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you,
Phil made me
Philip,
cut you
for
off.
joining my side. I appreciate you seeing the light. No, I agree. Low density, no housing.
Wait, okay. When we say low density, let's not say,
No
let's say,
housing.
let's say non-residential. Low density, in the planner's mind, is low density residential.
Non-residential.
All right.
So the current plan, none of that is residential down there? Is
That's
that-
correct. It's all zone neighborhood commercial. Would allow, I mean, it would allow for, currently would allow for mixed use units to develop down there. So it allows for residential, but it has to be stacked.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be favorable, especially with the other commercial uses there. I like, even if you have some office, commercial uses, potentially mixing in some, I don't know, restaurant spaces so that people who work there don't have to get on the roads to come to the village, to go to Southern Pines, to, get out for the day. I think the park, having the green space is helpful because it allows people to go take a walk. I think it's inviting to the surrounding neighborhoods to give, another outlet if that's there, if there are things nearby. I think it helps with, the values in the surrounding neighborhoods. It would allow, I think investment if possible. Again, I think a concern is always affordable housing, so I don't want to, price people out of their homes or force relocation, but, hopefully investment in this area in that form would, provide more opportunities. I think hopefully there would be more jobs available there, so, people in these neighborhoods, the surrounding neighborhoods close to the lake, they could even, utilize bike travel, walking, who knows? But yeah, I don't think there's a need for any single-family residential. I like the idea of the mixed-use plan as it is currently.
David? Mr. Jack?
You might be encouraged. We talked extensively about Olivia and Arnett Street because as you see in these plans here, it eliminates the railroad crossing at Arnett and kind of pushes it all onto Olivia, which at least I think the railroad prefers one crossing, either Arnett or Olivia. And these plans kind of recognize the fact that sooner or later, someone's going to have to get that squared away to make a better crossing there. And I don't know where that's going to end up, but clearly that has to be addressed. Along with the improvement in the area as far as maybe additional housing and or commercial building, hopefully that'll build up the area and people feel a little more compassion to fix their own houses to match the neighborhood. Of course, things take a long time sometimes. You got to kick people sometimes, and this may be one of the kicks. We'll see how that works out. We discussed that in depth. We also discussed the plans for a shared use trail, which I think the village is interested in exploring, whether I know that's sort of part of this plan, but that remains to be seen. And there's a lot of negotiation and work to be done to do that. I think most people, the public, were very happy to see open space in these plans, and to the extent possible, these plans should reflect open space, whether that's commercial open space next to commercial and or open space next to residential. I'm not sure it matters, but there has been a demand for some type of park and or recreation facility in that part of town, whether that's here and or over in the area owned by the village behind Bretton Woods. I don't know. We'll see. Behind Trotter. We'll see. There was significant concern, and I think we discussed it to some extent, the appropriateness of moving the village service area down to that area, but I think that's going to be a long time coming as far as, number one, deciding how they're going to pay for that, whether they really can relocate that. And I don't think that our decision needs to be addressing that particularly. There was a question, I questioned it, of the applicability of the plans and the form-based codes to Trotter Hills Office Park, since it's some large percent built out. And it appears to me, at least, I mean, that I looked at that area for years and years and years, and all there was Riney, real estate, insurance company. And now all of a sudden, in the last couple of years, we've got all these different offices that are buying in there. So it shows that there is some demand for commercial in this area. And Trotter Park is filling that. Whether or not we need to include it in these plans or not, I question, but that's for greater minds than mine to figure out. The focus of the discussion has been primarily as to whether or not housing, residential of some type, should be allowed or should be permitted in the area which was previously designated as an area which we hoped would be an attraction for businesses over the long term. And I'm still of the mind that it may be best to have an area in the village of Pinehurst for businesses who wish to relocate here or locate here to go and to build a building And particularly, I think we are becoming a kind of a golf services hub. The innovation hub has turned into a golf services hub to some extent. I mean, we have Golf Pride who moved here, spent a fair amount of money building their building. I suspect that now that the USGA is going to have its second headquarters here, along with, the commitment for opens and, just the idea of this being the home of American golf, this may be, to have the potential to be a real golf innovation area. I mean, the USGA having a testing center here speaks to what will be tested, all the equipment that these people provide, and they got to have businesses, and I'm sure that they would like to locate in this area. So that's why I strongly feel that we should keep at least some area in Pinehurst for businesses to be able to locate. So that's my feeling on that, so.
Just quickly, I want to add something. It's completely anecdotal to what Jack said, though. I know of at least one business that has had to look outside of Pinehurst to buy property because there wasn't any office space. And, they could have, this is a company hiring, 100 people, and they wanted office space, and they wanted to be in the village, and they couldn't because there was nowhere for them to go. So there is, again, very anecdotal, I get it, but it is happening. So.
Thank you, Jack. Louise?
I totally agree with Jack, and I really do think there's the opportunity for office service in that area. I mean, there could be some very nice office parks set in there, and they should be adjoined and whatever else. But I'm not for really high density residential development in here. I don't even think it would happen. I think it's more like a single family area. I mean, I know there are some condos and whatever there, but to me, it's a low density area. But the primary focus, I believe, should be on office and service industry, with some commercial in there, of course, to support it, but that's what I believe. And infrastructure is just horrid in that area. It's awful. And that's something that really needs attention before anything happens. I mean, you can't even put in any big developments without dealing with that, so. That's it.
Thank you, ma'am. Matt?
Question to start off with. So on the Mahaley property, if I'm looking at the overlay correctly, it's currently zoned neighborhood commercial.
Correct.
And where it is on this plan is actually proposed commercial and flex office. So it's a pretty similar zoning use as it relates to zoning as what there is there right now. And the park itself really is mostly off that property.
That's correct.
Right?
That's correct. That property is, 80 acres. I believe that one's on the market as well.
Okay.
That's zoned OP.
Right. I would propose, with regard to Page Street, that the portion that is solid just be changed to a dotted. Because the dotted is proposed to be proposed road. And I feel like that might be more consistent with the ambition of the plan. So that's my thought on that.
Let me just jump in on that. We might want to we could even put a label on there because it is a private street or a private drive. So that might be better. I think it might be more confusing if we put that pattern along the entire way. So I think we just got to figure out a way to label that, and maybe it's just with a label. It's that parcel itself that's following that line is, I think it's a 60. It is designed. The width is as a right-of-way width through that area. So I think that's the rationale for that. But yeah, I can see why we might want to change that label just to make it clear. Because again, nothing, we can start aiming roads at people. It doesn't have to connect up now, but that doesn't mean circumstances don't change in the future, because we do.
Right.
Things change over time.
Need that as a recommendation from us to make that change at this point, at this stage?
Is there a consensus to do that? If there's a consensus to me to make some change on that, you can just,
Kind of where I was going.
To somehow denote on the
Yeah,
plan
let me-
it's not.
Anybody that feels
That's-
any
For a
different.
recognition of reality, I
yeah,
think
hey, that's an easy change I can make. If that's the only one you're going to make to me on this one?
Okay, all right, okay.
Everybody agrees.
No, I just will comment on the comment about water. I mean, Moore County buys water from Harnett County and Southern Pines, and there are interlocal agreements between all these municipalities and water systems. So, when you're drinking water at the tap, you don't really know where it comes from. But you're trusting that it meets the standards, so, and it does. But anyway, I mean, growth is definitely going to tax utilities, but I think we're not isolated, which is to our benefit. So I wanted to make that point. And then on the density, I'm in favor of the comments of low residential. And it seems like what you're asking us on this one or the other, is it the G area noted on the plan on the east side? GH. Okay.
Whole area, everything below this park.
So the variation is, what do you do around that park? Do you go with residential or the commercial?
Or
which is what looks like a credit
non-residential.
card?
Non-residential. Right now, we're showing a residential pattern.
Oh, that's a residential?
Yeah, this is a residential. This is single-family attached.
What's the little one with the, looks like it's got a
See-
garage on
See,
it?
this is single-family detached. This is single-family attached.
That's what we're trying to get to office space now.
Correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Or commercial, which could be
Right.
mixed use.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, just,
You essentially want to reflect the current zoning, which is NC.
Okay.
Or BMU, correct?
My last comment for this point is I mean, I see the benefit of this plan, as has been said, is that we're trying to manage growth and to, as much as we can, affect the density. And if we don't do anything, somebody comes and they build a high-density option that's allowed, not that there's a lot of those, but where it could be done, that's if we do nothing, so.
The way I look at it, I guess the plan for this space is what it is. If it's trying to develop the office opportunities, potentially, you look at the cottages behind, that's a relatively, I'd say, high-density neighborhood with all single-family homes. That's a part of this plan. That's a part of this area. And under the current zoning, under the current code, that it had to be approved. They met every requirement, they checked every box, so that had to go forward. So again, having a plan in place that's more congruous with the goals or kind of what makes sense for the future versus what's in place now, I think is important. You eliminate. Not that there's anything wrong with that project, but you eliminate incongruous projects. So,
Good point, because I think, any sort of residential that gets identified as an option for this area, the consideration not only what type of multifamily, single-family attached or single-family detached it is, we also need to consider, really the other density pieces involved, on what it's actually going to be zoned as well. So that's something as well to consider, certainly, as part of that discussion earlier on whether or not there needs to be any residential involved. And to kind of open this can of worms, but I would like your input on this because we've hashed out traffic so much, okay? And I know it's a can of worms that we can open. But you've actually studied and looked into a lot of the DOT projects and their timeline as well as Jack has. Can you speak relatively, with as much detail as you're comfortable to as those projects and relative to this planning and any conflicts or anything like that?
Well, actually, Jack provided me with the plan from the meeting you went to. Remember what year that was?
that was a couple of years ago.
So DOT is showing future plans for Highway 5, and basically it starts with the widening of 5, starting at US 1 But by the time you get up to here, now this plan stops at Blake Boulevard. So, and
Right.
Jack noted they didn't
That's it?
really have known, but even up in here, they're not showing anything beyond, 2 through lanes with a turn lane, which is essentially what we have now.
Which is already there.
Yeah. So there's
Exactly right.
there's an improvement of that, but they're not showing a widening in there right now. So I doubt that they're going to come for that north plan to widen, from Blake Boulevard north. Most likely that would be consistent, but they would add turn lanes and that sort of thing, so.
No danger of the pedestrian pathway that we could see.
Yeah, it doesn't have that much detail on their planning model, but, yeah, it's somewhere
Gotcha.
on somebody's
Thank you.
desk.
Thank you for that. But just before we kind of move on into deliberation, and again, please review your staff noted procedures and motion templates, as hopefully someone's working towards a motion for this plan, if we feel so duly so. But really, just my inputs on this one, really is there's always going to be a multifamily demand, well, maybe not always, but certainly specifically, and it's very, very heavy for this area. So that's certainly a consideration as we take a look at what the community is going to desire. I mean, multifamily, I can get into a whole lot of market theories and all this. There's a lot of reasoning around multifamily being so developer-driven, not only in the Carolinas, but everywhere, really, across the nation today. And there's a lot of debate there. Now, however, that's something we want to consider, that pressure is going to be there, I think, certainly as we look at a plan. Really, when we get out of the village center area, are there any plans for any sort of another form-based code overlay in this area?
Mm-hmm.
There is, so it will be a total separate set of form-based code. That's where I'm going. So you have to, again, next steps for this are to develop a form-based codes for this area, which will be separate.
Correct.
Okay, I'm just paraphrasing that.
And
So-
there'll be a lot of similarities, but the building types, the Reglan plan is really what drives the types of buildings that can be in various areas. The architectural standards will probably be similar, things like that. Open space, the connected open space, things like that. But it's really becomes, the regulating plan becomes the tool, because the regulating plan will also say, we want buildings 1 to 3 stories, or we want them buildings minimum 2 stories, things like that.
Same timeline, I would probably imagine. It's going to be a congruent process, probably the same process moving forward, a parallel process, I would imagine. Or are you going to do this one now?
I don't know.
Don't know yet. Okay. I just want to speak real quickly on the Innovation Hub, because when we were going through the comprehensive plan, the discussion of the term Innovation Hub did come up, and I think we debated it quite extensively to where we understood at that point in time that it would not be what some communities and some cities really developed as a innovative hub.
Yeah, this was this was a consultant term. That was suggested, strongly suggested, and ended up being in the comprehensive plan. The idea being that it would be like a Palo Alto or a Research Triangle Park, or something to that, and then some technology would suddenly decide to center itself here. But I think as things have evolved, particularly with the USGA announcement, I think we've got our definition of what is our core industry, if you will, and we should capitalize on that. And that's
Where I was going.
yeah.
was-
The Innovation Hub was. We can use the Innovation Hub if you'd like to. We can call it Golf Innovation Hub. I don't care.
We knew back then that Duke was never going to establish a very large, innovative community here, and some very large company would not. And I think we discussed that at that point in time, if I recall correctly, and we understood that, our innovative hub is going to be smaller, but what it should do is give resources to other, or to the type of businesses that we want there, and it's neat that Golf Innovation is
Right. We're
kind of.
not going to get a drug firm. Pfizer is not going to put its headquarters here, or anything like that. So I think we have to look for smaller, mid-sized businesses who want to either have their primary location here or another location here, and that was sort of the concept of how we ended up on it.
I'm going to add that the market analysis did go into this. It went into the reasons why we don't have the characteristics for a true innovation hub. So there's some specific discussion right in that market analysis talking about, yeah, we just don't have those characteristics for the traditional. It gets into recommending, yes, we have the characteristics for a golf cluster type hub, things like that.
And we can support that industry correctly through our zoning processes. That's kind of what I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, I don't want to lead you. And then, of course, so that's the second set of consultants, kind of going against the first set of consultants, I guess, or no, who does, it was the Innovative Hub? said we
Well,
didn't
that
have
was all, that was comprehensive plan.
Yeah.
That was that. And there was a lot of questions on it at the time, whether it was really marketable or implementable. As part of this process, we specifically had this consultant look at that factor as part of the market analysis. So we could either rule it in, make it work, or rule it out. And I think the market analysis pretty much ruled that the innovation hub, the traditional innovation hub, out.
And I think Pinehurst has finally looked itself in the mirror and said, what are we strong at? What's our strength? And we've discovered what that is, and we should capitalize on it.
Exactly.
I would add that I think it's probably a little bit of an overlap. I mean, how many times did IBM advertise during the Masters? I mean, there's a little bit of an innovation factor going into it with golf analytics. I mean, so, I think Jack hit the nail on the head. It's going to be small to mid-sized companies locating a headquarters here or a secondary office here to have some sort of presence in this community. And so, yeah, I mean, there's going to be overlap. You may have more technology-driven companies who come here for the golf cluster purpose.
And my last point is really, I want to be supportive of any sort of connectivity we have through this area. And I know that as we move forward through the zoning process, really just supportive of the sidewalk area and any sort of interconnectivity, because now we have this housing development here. How can we promote any sort of movement outside of that community other than a car? So, and then as well as along the backside of Trotter Hills through that as well into, the Pinehurst area. So that's something that I think the plan is doing. I just want to make sure that I support that as well, and that's really my input. So any other questions, thoughts?
Should we show something like that on this? I mean, I know the kind of pie in the sky, the golf cart trail along 5, but is that something we should show on this, even with like a temporary marker? I mean,
What we have, talking about the shared use path?
correct.
But, I mean,
Am I not seeing?
we have it right.
You have it right there, okay.
We are showing it, and we discuss it specifically with this.
Okay, I didn't know if it had to be on that other map, because it wasn't on that, okay.
And then Mr. Blackman can get to the post office without going out on Route 5.
Okay, how comfortable are we? Does anybody, any other discussions we need to make? Let's go and start thinking about a motion and any sort of a.
Option 2, is that the one?
That's what it sounds like, and I want to make one more comment since we have a council member in the room, because I don't want to attach this as a recommendation, but I'm going to recommend it
Okay.
offhandedly in a public comment kind of way. The green space down there, my recommendation would be to, when the time comes to talk about green space down there, I'm going to go back to my previous comment at the last meeting of try to incorporate multiple functionality into a green space, whether it's stormwater retention. Let's not just have a green space, but have it to where it serves multiple purposes. That way we don't have these little stormwater retention areas on every single property, but we have maybe one large area that accounts for the entire park, so to speak, the entire development. Exactly. So you got this in here. So can we, designate that the interactive water feature as, stormwater retention and again, the old phrase, kill multiple birds with one stone.
That could be very
I
important.
didn't want to attach that to the option. So.
Thank you for that. I think that could be very, very important in a couple years. What else?
I'm ready to make a motion. I move that the Planning and Zoning Board recommend the Pinehurst South Small Area Plan to the Pinehurst Village Council for adoption with revision based on the following option, that we recommend changing the proposed residential land use pattern south of Blake Boulevard as identified on pages 72 and 73 of the plan to non-residential land use pattern.
Make a second.
We have a motion as stated by David Almazora and seconded by Sonia Rothstein. I would like to perform a roll call vote. We'll go ahead and begin on my left-hand side this time, just to mix it up with Matt.
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous, the ayes have it, 0 against. The plan moves forward as a recommendation to council as stated in the motion.
Yahoo.
Oh.
Do you think that was going to be worse than that?
Oh, no. No, you're just not, we're not, you've ruined my birthday, but that's, No, I'm kidding, I'm kidding.
Remind me who set
I'm
the
kidding.
agenda?
Say that again?
Who set the agenda for
We knew
this
it was
meeting?
Let's go ahead and move on to the next agenda item in the, in the agenda today. Any sort of general business from anyone?
I do
Please.
upcoming items.
Yep.
It looks like we will have a need for Board of Adjustment to meet, likely June meeting, so judging by David's reaction, I hope that means he's available. There's one little piece that's kind of still, minor piece that's floating out there, but we do have an application and everything in for a variance request, so we will be needing to meet for Board of Adjustment. So we'll be communicating with David. Julia, who's not here, is the vice chair, just in case we need a backup or whatnot, but I'm trying to remember our appointments and members now. I think Philip's now a permanent of the 5, but if, I know.
I should be here.
Yes, okay. Okay. Not at the time, but it still was encouraging for those to witness. Anyway, we'll have business as a Board of Adjustment, June, most likely.
Thank you. Any other general business before I've got one?
No, thank you all for the email traffic back and forth. I think that helps these conversations, sharing of resources that you may find and opinions, anything. I mean, I think it helps move these a little more smoothly.
Yeah, I think so too, just to kind of get us some things out of the way. Now, but however, let's go ahead and be above the table here. Alex, those emails do get saved, right, for any other reason? I mean, we're being,
The comments that
they
were
are within
forwarded that
line of
we asked
anything
to
we've got
keep-
going on,
Yeah,
talking
of
about a
course.
meeting.
Anything you guys do when it relates to business to the Village of Pinehurst is public record.
We are at this point in time, just to be clear upon that, we're just making sure that we don't cross any lines with any of that. And that's why it's actually prudent to kind of discuss that in an email portion before we get this, because a lot of it is very directional driven and not specific to what we've got going on. So I'm glad that's helpful to get us to a point, just to make that point. I'll make the final general business comment here, and we've all heard it tonight, but today is Darren's birthday, and he is spending. Well, let's make a fuss real quick. Because the hours and hours and hours and hours that he's just spent with us, not and it was just the
years
tip of
and
the
years that he's been on this planet.
yeah, and it's just the tip of the iceberg to what he spent overall on these plans. So happy birthday, Darren. With that, I'll just announce that our next meeting date is June 2nd, 2022. And I will ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion by Sonia, second by David. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, you guys have a great evening. Thank you.